Sorry.
That's good to know. There will be a record that we were here. But I'm really excited to introduce you all today to three leaders to my left who represent a fifth community, vital to raising the performance of the built environment. And that community is young people. So directly to my left, we have Nathan Hutchinson Edgar, who is the environmental officer at the Trinity College Dublin Students' Union. Founded in 1968, the union at Trinity College Dublin currently represents around 17,500 students from across the university. To Nathan's left is Colette Murphy, the current Vice President for Welfare at the Union of Students in Ireland. Founded in 1959, USI currently represents 374,000 students in over 40 universities across the island of Ireland. And on the end, there is Anna Weinrich, who is a board member of the Organizing Bureau of European School Student Unions. And Anna is joining us from Copenhagen. And since its founding, the bureau that Anna represents has grown to represent 35 national student unions from 26 countries. So together, the student leaders on this stage democratically represent millions of students from the city of Dublin, the island of Ireland, and the European continent. Now to begin, I will turn it over to Nathan from Trinity to start us off.
Hello, thank you for introducing me, Henry, and thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to speak to you all. So yes, as mentioned, my name is Nathan, Nathan Hutchinson, and I come from Trinity College Dublin Student Union, and I represent the environmental aspects of our union in negotiating with the college and also wider governing structures, and representing, trying to increase sustainable initiatives within the college, both in a sort of a lobbying and a collaborative capacity. So just, I suppose, to start off, like, because I was, I suppose student unions are kind of a strange concept maybe at these kind of conferences. So a student union is kind of every student within Trinity College is a member of our union, and when we work with college, we will try and raise the welfare of students and raise the voice of students and the opinions of students. And we also lobby, and we will be agitate and activate for change towards more sustainable futures in my case, but also for student welfare and housing rights, things like that. So it's kind of a combination of that. Personally, in my capacity, I've seen a lot throughout my time in college how, by building these sort of grassroots movements, we can actually influence our institutions to change in a more progressive and more sustainable way. So, for example, before even I was involved in them, at our last provost election, there was a broad agreement between staff members and student members that the college was not doing enough for sustainability. So a big pledge was made was promoted by a huge amount of students and staff to ensure that the next provost would enact sustainable policies. And we required that they would then pledge while they were campaigning for the role of provost leader of the university that they would do this. And following that, they all did, and as a result of that, we now have a vice provost for biodiversity and climate change. So that was a very big institutional change. That led to the development of sustainability strategy, that led to further developments in that line, and that is a very positive change. But we still activate, we still agitate for further change and in that direction. One big role that universities play is in enabling students and young people who are going to have to go through the worst of climate crisis and the biodiversity loss that we're seeing around us to become more sustainable in their own approaches to things, as they will need to going forward. So also be more aware of bigger environmental change. So one project that I've had the privilege of working on this year has been to develop a common student staff module that will hopefully eventually become more or less across the whole college, that every student will take it at some point. And so I've worked with staff members to try and develop this. I've worked with students to develop this, and I have tried as much as I can to bring the voice, the backing of this, as Henry said, 17,000 students to this project in the capacity that I represent. So it has been developed, this new module, to try and make us think of sustainable futures and imagine kind of these sustainable, maybe post-growth futures and things like that, that we need to start looking at if we want to take sustainability seriously. And it's been developed alongside students. So both my presence as a representative of the student voice, but also has engaged students in the process. So in the development of the module that all students hopefully will eventually take to teach them about sustainability, it has included those student voices to ensure that issues relating to, for example, climate justice are included and things like that, which is very important in the development of these issues. And so that's one example of how by hiring they hired 4 student interns to do some of this work, and by hiring those student interns and including myself and other student representatives, we were able to push for a more sustainable approach and a more representative and engaging approach that people would actually care about, which I think was a huge plus for that particular project. On a broader scale, we continue to lobby, sometimes even at higher levels than within the college, at governmental level and local governmental levels, for student rights issues, for that kind of thing. And I think that is becoming increasingly important as we look at our cities, that they include these youth voices, because ultimately it's more or less going to be our future, and that's quite important, that what we envisage the world to be and what we hope that people take into account is that we might have a different way of looking at that because we're actually going to have to live through that, and that's very important. But I think the fact that we have, particularly this last year, I think we've moved from much more kind of individualized approach to more of a grassroots kind of approach. And I think that's kind of the key thing, that if you want to move towards more sustainable communities, more sustainable cities, you need to kind of interact with those communities, and you need to ensure that voices from people in those communities are heard. And I think we've done that. We've had to scream and shout to do that sometimes, but I think it really is to your benefit and to ours if you listen when we tell you what we want and what we feel you could be doing. So thank you, and I will now hand over to Colette, who will talk a little more about student union work.
Thank you, Nathan. So my name is Colette, and I work as the Vice President for Welfare and Lead of Students in Ireland. So I might just introduce to you a little bit the way student unions work in Ireland. I know that internationally it varies a lot, and we actually have students everywhere. So basically in Ireland, so if you attend college or university, and you start your first day in college, you're automatically a member of your student union. So generally how it works is a student levy, and a certain percentage of the money that you pay goes towards your membership of the student union. So I went to DC, for example, there's around 18,000 students there, and I automatically was a member of the student union when I joined. And I suppose having automatic membership of the student union is really important, because it means that students are represented at every level when they join student unions when they're in college. So our class rep system is the foundations of the student unions in Ireland. So if there's a class of 30 students, you probably have 2 class reps. If there's a class of 50, 75, you get 3, 4, so on. So we have a class rep council, so all the class reps from across the college all form class rep council, and students bring forward motions, debate things, a lot of papers to do with issues that are happening on campus. Maybe the microwaves are always broken, or it could be a wider social issue that people want to get involved in. It could be, we don't think our students are doing for the environment, please do more. And then we'll mandate certain actions, etc. So it's very locally based, but it's also wider based in your area and nationally as well. So most student unions around the country are members of USI, so we're the National Students Union. So each college or each student union pays membership fees to USI, and through that then we represent 375,000 students through our affiliated members. In a student union, we have elections every year, so people elect part-time officers and full-time officers to represent them. The representation of students in Ireland is very heavily embedded in colleges. So whether it's a program board meeting, this program board meeting, there'll be past after program board meetings, faculty board meetings, there'll be student representatives representing their faculty. Then similarly, a governing body, academic council, executive in the university, there'll be full-time student officers who have taken a year out of college to represent students at a full-time payroll, or else they will be doing that job after they've left college. So students' unions are a really integral part of the college experience in Ireland, and students are very engaged in these. Students' unions run events, the fun stuff, the big ball of freshers, the big end of year ball, but also do the day-to-day lobbying, casework, the representation on different committees. And also most students' unions are heavily engaged with the National Students' Union. So we meet about every 6 weeks. We have a national council, we have working groups where we look at different issues that are affecting students. Obviously there's the core student issues, and we might be meeting to discuss repeat fees across the country, and there's something to look into to ensure that students know what's going to happen. So say for example, some colleges, you don't know what year you're progressing into because you don't get your results until halfway through the next semester. So that's what we're working on at the moment. We also work on SUSI grant reform, that's our national financial grant system in Ireland. Also, accommodation crisis is a massive issue in Ireland, and obviously that's why we're engaged here at the Building Actions Coalition, because we want to be doing more with environmental lobbying, because at the moment the accommodation crisis and cost of living crisis will be the main two issues affecting students nationally. And I don't know if you've seen the news, but there's a massive shortage of accommodation for students. So a lot more students are commuting nowadays, commuting 2-3 hours to get to college and 2-3 hours home. But also what we're looking for is that there's purpose-built student accommodation on campus, and that's where our main lobbying efforts are focused at the moment. But I suppose one area that we're aware of that we need to get better on is that how we're lobbying for purpose-built student accommodation, that it is environmentally friendly. And that's why we're here to engage with all of you, because of course we want more policy expertise on what exactly we should be lobbying on, and what metrics to measure progress on in terms of building sustainably. So we're good at the lobbying, agitating, representing our needs aspect, but we want a little bit more information on the specific, I suppose, environmental policy points. But yeah, I suppose in terms of like our lobbying efforts in general, like say for example, like we do have some successes each year. So this year, our ultimate goal is that education in Ireland is free to public access. We want the abolition of student fees. So currently it costs around €3,000 to go to college per year. Obviously I know in comparison to some systems that is less, but it still does create an inequality and difficulty in accessing education. So we've been lobbying for a reduction with the goal of the abolition, and we did get a temporary €1,000 fee reduction this year. So that was obviously €1,000 back in students' pockets or their parents' pockets. It also means that helps alleviate the cost going to college, even if it's just a little bit. But every little helps, and we felt like it was an important success this year. So I suppose we meet with policymakers, we meet with politicians. We also meet regularly with other interest groups with similar goals to us, whether it's a student-specific bread and butter issue like student fees, or even like accommodation, but obviously accommodation, we're also meeting and lobbying with other organisations as well, or engaging various different coalitions. And then we hope as well, like we're really trying to increase the efforts with environmental change, and this week we're having our first ever Eco Action Forum. So our members want us to up our lobbying efforts with the environment, and we have been so active in previous social change movements like Repeal the BAC or Equal Marriage in Ireland. So this is a wider social movement that young people are passionate about, and we want to get engaged in further. And then this Thursday, yeah, we're having our first ever Eco Action Forum. So we're just getting Green Campus people together, student environmental societies across the country, student unions across the country are all meeting with you from 10 to 4 p.m. on Thursday. We're trying to get some actions going. And yeah, I know we're hoping for an environmental justice committee from that. But yeah, we hope this engagement as a coalition will really help us with the accommodation aspect in particular, because that's so vital to progress going forward. And yeah, we're really hoping to get some great engagement with this. So really looking forward to working with you all in the future.
All right. Hello. So now we've heard a bit about national student unions and local student unions, and as Henry mentioned before, I represent OBESU, which is known as the Organizing Bureau of European School Student Unions, and we represent national, democratic, representative, youth-led student unions from all over Europe. And right now, as Henry also mentioned, we represent 35 national student unions from 26 European countries. And we've been here since 1975, so not as long as the two other organizations, but almost 50 years. So we're standing strong and we are growing rapidly. And in OBESU, we represent secondary students, so high school students that go to general secondary school, and also vocational educational training and apprentices. So they, especially the last two, work a lot on the built environment and are super important in these discussions. And yeah, we have a pretty diverse membership, I'd say, as well. We are pan-European, so we don't only work inside the European Union, but we also represent broader than that, and we have very, very old established unions that come from, for example, Italy, Spain, France, Finland, Denmark, like where I'm from, that have been here for maybe over 100 years. And we also have fairly new unions that might need help in different areas, for example, from Turkey, and we helped in the 90s establish unions in the Balkan countries to make sure that young people and students there also had a place to exercise democracy and make sure that their voices were heard. And some of the main goals of OBESU is to always make sure that students are seen as valuable stakeholders when it comes to anything concerning their lives. So now that we work at a broader perspective, it might not be ensuring that the microwaves are working in schools, but more making sure that students have a space at the decision-making table, or that they have the tools that they need to lobby and advocate for them being able to sit on the national or local boards at their schools. Another thing that we fight a lot for is to contribute to the development of democratic educational systems and making sure that there's active citizenship both in schools and beyond, for example, through student unions. And since we are an umbrella organization and a bureau, we also try to gather all these national perspectives and things that students fight for and kind of bring them together on a European level. Because I think we all know that unions think that all of us together have a stronger voice, so that's what we're trying to amplify through us. A lot of our unions are in the same ocean in the sense that they have a lot of the same things they fight for, a lot of the same struggles like education funding, climate, not being heard or listened to, but they're in different boats. So we're trying to see what all these different boats have in common and how we can work together and stand stronger and advocate for student rights. So when it comes to advocacy on a European level, we work in different ways with different European bodies. For example, we work a lot with the European Parliament. We talk a lot to members of the European Parliament and do consultations. For example, leading up to the European Parliament elections coming this summer, we've been doing consultations with the different groups inside the Parliament, trying to align our student manifesto with their party manifesto to see how we can work together and make sure that the youth is being heard, and especially with students in education. We're also on different working groups of the Commission and work a lot with Teaching Act, for example, on education, youth, and sports. And other than that, we have policy papers that are written by our members and voted through by our members at our statutory events that we push through. One of the newest ones being on the twin transition, with a big focus on the green transition as well, which is very much in line with the things we'll be talking about the next 3 days. Through doing this, some of the achievements we have is we have our Declaration of School Student Rights, which is amazing, and we got to present that in the Parliament for a lifelong learning week, which had a focus on education and different perspectives. And we're also, we have a permanent spot on the Advisory Committee of Vocational Education of the European Commission, again, which will play a big role in the built environment and our vocational students and our apprenticeships. And also, yeah, as I mentioned, working groups, like I'm, for example, on one on education for sustainable development right now. Another big achievement to kind of scale it up a bit is that we are founding members of the Global Student Forum. So we might be an umbrella for Europe, but this is an even bigger and wider umbrella that represents regional bodies. So for example, we have members from Europe, Africa, the Commonwealth countries, Latin America, and we're expanding. And we also have associate members that could be a student organization focusing on refugee students or students organizing for sustainability, for example. And the Global Student Forum right now represents over 300 million students, so it's even bigger and even more representative body here. And when it comes to climate activism and climate action, it can be equally as important to work on a local level as it is to work on a global level when it comes to these different problems and actions that need to be taken. For example, a big focus in the Global Student Forum right now is making sure we get perspectives from both the global north and south and seeing how we can work together. And ways we do that is, for example, we have pre-COP meetings every year where we work on a global student declaration, and then we also do advocacy training for COP so we can kind of push our agenda as fast as possible and try to streamline our visions to really get our message through as much as we can. And then other than that, we also have international campaigns that we disseminate through our regional bodies. So for example, in OBESU, we try to bring European perspective and see how we can support each other in different ways. Yeah, so both through OBESU and the Global Student Forum, we do a lot of different climate work, everything from BET students and making sure that they have a safe and updated and inclusive space to learn how to build sustainably, all the way to working on a collaboration on a global north and south level. Yeah, so to continue the talk on international student activism, I'll invite Henry up for some
So considering these really exciting and groundbreaking remarks that you've just heard, if we aim to recruit academic institutions to conduct research, revamp curricula, and train the next generation of engineers and architects, the participation of students is essential. If we aim to aid national governments in signing up to our buildings breakthrough target, the political partnership of students is essential again. And if we aim to ensure long-term support from local counties to global decision-making bodies, the dedication of students is also essential. Young people are the catalysts that can address the immense inertia of the buildings and construction sector. For we represent a genuine movement. But really, only by working together across generations can we take climate action at scale and begin the long but no less exciting work of integrating the actions of all 5 community stakeholders in pursuit of achieving the 2030 agenda and securing both real and rapid progress toward sustainable goals. Thank you.
You'll take questions.
Yes, I will.
As I said in my initial remarks, I see the communities that you represent as a huge opportunity for what we're trying to achieve. Don't talk about them. All right. Anyway, the idea of being able to mobilize, on the one hand, it's about standing up for student rights and saying climate's changing, this is going to impact on us. I'm looking at it a much more self-interested perspective of using your networks to get this what this community wants to achieve. We had a Bureau meeting a number of years ago, on the Bureau of the United Nations, and the statement was made that politicians will only act if they accept that their actions won't lead to their never being elected to office again. So it really needs to be a grassroots level of empowering politicians to act, not only realizing that they can't get it right perfectly all the time, but that if they do act, it's okay, and we'll vote for you then. I would think that the student bodies that you represent could be an extremely powerful tool in carrying that forward. Have you mobilized in that direction before? Do you see some possibility in that direction?
To answer your question briefly, yes. I would say one of the main reasons that we're here is because we do, in fact, see that partnership as being one of the most important directions for the student movement and for youth-led NGOs in particular. Colette spoke briefly about the need for policy advice and policy expertise. Right now, I think there is a tendency, which is only natural, for students and young people to advocate for the issues that affect their quality of life, because coming of age now is really quite difficult. I mean, it's always been difficult. The 20th century was easily the most violent century, or one of them in human history. But to be young now and to face the climate crisis, which is looming before us, causes a great deal of anxiety. And I recall in your remarks in particular, you mentioned that the crisis could take on biblical proportions, and that we're sort of operating on a doomsday clock, so to speak. And so as a young person with access to these networks, and yet possessing at the same time this very worrying knowledge that it's not as if our future is in some very distant time or threatened, but this is now. This is our lives now. So to sort of tie up your question as to are we thinking about this? Yes, it's really something that we think about, at least for me personally, all the time. And I would say that your self-interest, so to speak, is more than welcome because this is an issue that really strikes at the heart of a lot of the anxiety that we experience. And politically, considering the really regular and sustained interaction that the young people sitting on the stage have with their decision makers, I completely agree, and I'm sure that they would as well, that the opportunity that we have here for young people to be communicators and leaders on making the built environment more sustainable is really significant. And that can take place, in municipal councils. The Union at Trinity has a very active presence in local government, and in Dublin as a city. USI itself, as Colette said, works at the national level. We were regularly engaging with decision makers. And OBESU, which Anna represents, engages regularly with the European Parliament and the Council of Europe. So it does seem that the self-interest you mentioned is both necessary and very aligned.
Yeah, I think that is true to a degree. I think the one thing I'd add is obviously we do have an interest in improving the quality of our built environment, and supporting these initiatives. But I think the one thing that kind of strikes me is that if there is to be some sort of relationship, it has to be as reciprocal as possible. So you mentioned like us as a tool, but like in a way, like then I think you also kind of have to be a tool for us, if that makes sense. There has to be this kind of reciprocation that, because with a lot of initiatives, not to say this, but there's a lot of times there's an initiative you get for the students to promote it, which generally, I'm not saying you personally, but like that people won't really listen to what we have to say. And I think it's a matter of building up this kind of relationship and this reciprocal relationship, whereby what we say feeds into what you do, and what you do, we can then promote and we can support and we can advocate for at different levels of like government or within our communities. And so I think even making people aware of that is important. But I think the key thing is that kind of that respect and that reciprocation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you summarized it really well there. I suppose from our perspective, like, yes, of course, we're lobbying the government, etc. But our engagement is two-way. We're also out on campuses between our team every day of the week, engaging with students and running various campaigns. And I hope that's where we get to with our environmental lobbying as well, because I think you can run an online campaign to get people engaged, but we're just talking about there, it's very passive engagement. But I find like our most effective campaigns, or the ones that are the highest value, are the ones where we're actually out on campus and we're talking to people and we're having a back and forth conversation on why something matters, why should you care about going to a protest, or what's the purpose of a protest in the first place. So in terms of mobilizing, I think you reach as students by I suppose going out on a campus, but the quality of engagement is higher, and also if somebody leaves and they feel passionate to get involved in climate action, then that's something they're going to be talking about with their friends. They then have a network themselves that they can also use. So I think, like, I do think numbers at the end of the day are what make the difference in climate action. I think as well, like, my younger brother and sister were in secondary school when when all secondary school students across Europe and probably the world were walking out of class, and I remember seeing like this thousands of Irish students outside the Dáil, secondary school students who'd mobilised on climate action, and that generation are in college now. So I think I attended such a big protest at such a young age, that stays with you, and the desire for change stays with you. So I do think there's something that we can tap into there, and like people's lives are busier when they're in college and they are commuting longer hours, they're working longer hours than they even were a few years ago, and the data backs it up. So in terms of time to get engaged in things, it's lower, and I think that does affect ability to mobilise. But that being said, the passion and the desire is still there, and I do really think that there's a lot of room for change. And yeah, like we've seen it with, people get riled up about the accommodation crisis, they will go to a protest. I think it is hard to get people engaged than it was a little while ago, but that doesn't mean a few less numbers, it's still, you still have enough numbers. One person is always better than none. So I do think there's a lot of hope, and I'm really hoping, like from our end, when we have our Eco Action Forum on Thursday, it's a very open space. We're getting different stakeholders in the whole area involved, but the focus is what do students want to do, and it's I know it's going to be like a brainstorming session, going off in all directions, but it's going to give us direction, give us focus for what our goals are, because I think people sometimes feel disempowered with the climate crisis, because when you're lobbying on accommodation, for example, you know who your Minister for Housing is, and you know who you're lobbying, and you know who the political parties are in government. But I think with the climate crisis, there's a great sense that it's a bigger issue than any of us, and people don't know what goal to be aiming for. So I think for us that will be something that we're going to define, or hope to define on Thursday. And I think something that's as relatable to people's real lives as possible is what's most likely to get people up and get people going. I think that sort of those in-person conversations about the climate crisis are
what's going to help build numbers, even if it's, you know, slowly at first. But I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a tale as old as time for student unionists that we want to not only be heard, but actually listened to. And that's something that we always can come back to, and we always can mention is that we need a seat at the table, need a space where we're invited to talk and to advocate for what we believe in. So I think having spaces like that is definitely the most important thing, because you do see movements and actions like, for example, Fridays for Future, where you see young people and students that are so involved and really passionate about the climate crisis, but they have nowhere else to go but the streets to protest and to be seen and to be heard. So I think spaces like this, where we're having this intergenerational dialogue and where young people are seen as valuable stakeholders and not just as a buzzword to be used when it comes to climate action, is so important. And that's the way we can really mobilize people. And by having these concrete goals and numbers and all this, it's more comprehensible, and therefore it's easier to work with, because then we kind of get away from that anxiety that Henry mentioned, where it's like all these things falling on us at once, but then instead here we can more focus on streamlining a few things and working on that. So I think that's a good way to start and build from that.
Or Randall yelling.
No, I'll yell at you.
Just a really quick one. I think it's student union representation is really important. I think what's great and what I think I'm seeing an undercurrent of is that you're not just imagining yourself now as student union reps and represent students forever. What I think I'm hearing what is really important is that you as students are observing us as people who develop policy, as people in academia, as industry experts, as the developers, and the contractors who are building these new buildings, and the architects and engineers who will advise them. I'd love for you to keep that in mind, that you, in 15 and 20 years' time, you're going to be us, making these decisions, taking these decisions, involved in this dialogue. Don't just advocate on issues. Please look at the way we're doing business and do it better.
Please.
So observe.
We agree.
Observe the good things that happen and where we work well together. Observe the things that we're not doing well. Make us talk about the things we're not doing well, and do it better than we've done it in 5, 10, 15 years' time. Because in 5, 10, and 15 years' time, you could be Taoiseach of this country. You could be the chief executive of a multinational. You could be a tech billionaire, or those you represent. And if you have that mindset now, you carry this network of people, it could have huge impact. So learn from our mistakes and make us describe.
Let me just add one point. I think to respond to that really briefly, one of the main reasons that we are here as a group is because we really have been looking forward to the opportunity to learn from you all. At the same time, as Nathan, Colette, and Anna, briefly elucidated, they are sitting alongside decision makers today. In their university bodies, in municipal councils, in governmental committees, and even in the Council of Europe. So even though it's certainly possible that in a few years we will have more responsibility and may even be sitting where you are now, right now we are sitting at the same table and these young people here have real decision-making power. And so what I'm really excited for over the next 3 days is seeing what sort of conversations take place, what can we learn from you all, and how can we sort of describe the work that we're engaging in. And so I hope we're very friendly and more than open to beginning dialogues with you all, but we also hope that if you have a question about working with Trinity College, if you have interest in discussing student politics at the national please don't hesitate to ask any of these young people a question, because we're here, in fact, out of that spirit of curiosity and collaboration.
I'll just say, am I on? Just I'm seeing you as acorns, and I have I'm the grandfather of 13 grandchildren. So when I see you up there, I feel so pleased to see you. And I've invited tomorrow one of my grandsons, Cool, who's up in UCD, and he studied the environment program there. So I'm pleased that he will meet you hopefully tomorrow. So well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Right, I think
Yeah,
we
Justin,
need
yeah.
to go. So thank you very much. Another round of applause.
Motivational speech. Commencement address.
They were absolutely wonderful. And the idea is that we're going to separate them out for meals, so that they can inspire all the old folkies like me that are in the room, and disseminate their knowledge from them to the rest of us. So we want to make sure that we all listen and we learn from each other. That's the important thing. But many people don't learn from their own mistakes, let alone from others. But I do hope that the next generation learns from the mistakes of previous generations. So thank you for that. It was really, really good. Now I want to introduce, continuing on with our from universities, we have Justin Schwartz, is Executive Vice President Provost of Penn State University. Justin is also a member of Enniscorthy Forum Strategic Advisory Board. And joining us on Zoom, he's going to speak about knowledge and action, universities for a sustainable age. So Justin Schwartz.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, at least by Zoom. I wish I could be there in person. What I'd like to talk about today is what I would call knowledge and action, and it's sort of a new approach for universities to think about their role in sustainability for what we hope to have as a sustainable age. So sort of in the concept of bottom line up front, we know we have a crisis of sustainability. We know we need new ideas for the relationship between human societies or humanity and nature. We talk a lot about the impact on the Earth. I think regardless of what we do, the Earth is going to actually be quite fine. It's going to continue to spin in orbit. The real question is the nature of the life that it supports. And so I think of this, in a world where short phrases is welcome. We really have two fundamental goals for
You might be
humanity.
better just turning off.
And can you hear me all right?
You're breaking up a little. Maybe if you turned off your camera, you see if that works better, because you seem to be dropping in and out.
Sure.
Thank you. We'll
Yep.
see if that's better.
Okay, so we really have two fundamental goals for humanity, and I just consider it to survive and to thrive. To get there, that idea, we need a new idea or a rebirth of the idea for the role of universities. It's really more of a re-embracing than something new, in that universities have a long history of positive transformations, or even I would call disruptions. Universities fundamentally educate and tool large numbers of people. And today, as we've seen, the current generation really wants to be focused on impact. So with intentionality, universities can build, what we could call an army of sustainability soldiers. We are also now, as universities, far more international in the way we operate in general, which means we have the potential to bring together cultural mixing in ways that I don't think there's any other institution or industry can do readily, with the exception of social media.
Fortunately, Justin, that keeps breaking up. Can you dial in on your mobile on the number to the Zoom that's on the invitation.
Yes, that will take me a moment.
That's fine, it's just, it's too important that we're missing too much of what you're saying. And we really want to hear what you're saying, so if you don't mind.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, and everyone.
Yeah,
There wasn't anything on my end.
I don't think so. And I've asked everyone here to turn off their Wi-Fi, so it seems to be jumping. You turn off your Wi-Fi.
My Wi-Fi's off.
We're trying everyone to turn off your Wi-Fi in the room, please. So we're trying to conserve as much as possible for.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Doesn't look like it's both really
It's jumping. And ours is jumping there still.
This is not jumping here.
It's jumping there.
Yeah.
So it's that cable there again.
It's a cable. Let's pull this up like this.
He was coming through to me fine.
No, it's gone all together now.
It's gonna come back. It's gonna come back.
No, it's gone. This is the problem we had at lunch.
We're also counting on the young people to invent better technologies for video conferencing so that we don't have.
Yeah, but the audio won't go up there. That's okay. When he dials back in, it'll be direct here.
Yeah, and when he dials back in, it'll be direct to there. But we're gonna have to get it right there. Oh, I love technology when it works.
So I wanted to come, I was going to ask a question. I suppose my colleagues in Paris last month.
Cell phone up to my
I am not
Huh.
sure
because you've got, if he calls into Zoom, it's still gonna have the same problem.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm worried about my company. And
Let me see if I can get Justin.
more and more people
I'm not sure I've got his phone.
look at that. And that's the challenge, I think, for you guys, is to get.
I don't have it.
Hold on, let me write to Bob.
We have something. Because it's then your future. I'm just gonna leave that out.
And I'm gonna go in a different
We
direction.
don't- we
I
don't
don't
do
think
it.
that's on you guys at
Yeah.
all. I think that's on the rest of us who are sitting here doing the same thing to like.
Can we need to let him come in. Hold on.
Good.
We
So
got
can you
him
hear
on
me
now.
now?
Pay
attention. That's the way.
Justin, are you able to hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Justin, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you. Do you hear me?
He's there. No, he's up there.
He's
He's
up there. Try
Can you
again.
hear me on the phone? Hello?
Put that microphone.
that's not the issue. He's just not connected. He is connected, but it's not coming through.
It's not coming through.
We're not getting you, Justin.
Okay.
We're just not getting it.
I'm hearing him. Can you hear me?
Can we try again?
I hear you better than before. He says that to us. That's good. And Bob is just unmuted. Is Bob wanting to come in?
What I'm letting you know is I can hear him.
We need to.
Guys, we need to be quiet in the room because Justin is on the call line there, but we're trying to see if we can hear him.
Can you hear me?
Justin is able to hear us very well.
Mhm.
And
Can you
things are
hear me
happening
now?
on screen. I do have it. It's 850
Wait a second. Plus,
1 plus 1
yeah, +1
850
850
980
980
0756.
0756.
Now he's on this call with
So he
his.
needs to hang up.
So Justin, if you can hear us, Mike Oldak is calling you, and then we would put that phone up to the microphone.
I think when you standing on that cable.
Justin, could you hear what they'd said to you?
He hung up.
Okay.
It's ringing now.
Oh, we miss you.
You need to put that on speaker.
Yeah, it is.
Is the speaker here?
Hello?
Hi, Justin. This is Scott. We're trying to get you.
Just
We're getting there.
hello. Start talking.
Hello?
That's Michael. Yeah, we hear you. So let's try this again.
Should we just start from here?
Yeah, that should work. Get her to cut it.
Is he on speaker?
He's on speaker. It's not coming through. But
Yeah,
there's some-
talk, please talk. Yeah.
No,
Turn up the
it's on
volume.
speaker.
Yeah, but turn up the volume.
It's
It
on
is
its
up.
maximum.
Okay, but then speak, Justin, please.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I hear you, but let's
Does the room hear me?
the room is now hearing you.
Oh, great. So I start over?
Yes, yes, please.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the patience of everyone as we sort through tech issues. So what I want to talk about today is what I think should be the role for universities in creating the sustainable age, bringing together knowledge and action together. We are currently in truly a crisis of sustainability, and this means we, of course, need to rethink the way human society interacts with nature with a new mindset and framework. We talk often about, the damage we're doing to the Earth. So I think the reality is the Earth will be fine. It's going to continue to spin in orbit. The real question is the nature of the life that it supports. And so in that context, I think we need to be formulating two fundamental goals for humanity, which I simply phrase as survive and thrive. And that idea leads to, you could say, a new idea for the role of universities, or really, I would argue, a re-embracing of the historic role of universities. So in universities around the globe, there is a true history of positive transformations or even disruptions. Universities, what we do mostly is educate and tool vast numbers of people. And today we find that the current generation really wants to focus themselves on having the impact that's needed. So with intentionality, universities can build the army of sustainability soldiers that we need. Universities are also today far more international than they ever before, bringing together a level of cultural mixing in ways that no other institution or industry can do. In terms of the scale of cultural mixing, I would say social media actually has even more capability. But in terms of true cultural understanding, I think universities are positioned to do it on a large scale better than anyone. And humans are very tribal by nature, we know that. And so for the survive and thrive idea to move forward, we need to evolve as a species to developing the idea that all humanity is my tribe. That's really the mindset that we need for global collective action. And so the core idea going forward then is the holistic integration of knowledge and implementation. And part of the newness here for universities is to take the implementation to a new scale. But to do this, we also have to really tear down the siloing that's historically present both within universities and between them. We also need to think about a new type of collaboration between universities and the rest of society. And this is something where there's vast differences around the globe. But in the US right now, there has been for decades a growing distrust of universities, which is a huge impediment to where we need to go going forward. So our efforts collectively are critical to making these types of changes happen. And I would say that from the perspective of what we're doing right now in the building space, a second but truly consequential goal should be showing other industries, other arenas where change is needed, that a new partnership model for advancing implementation through collaborative action is possible. So the work that is being done here with the Enniscorthy Forum Building Action Coalition is important work for engaging this new important movement. The unfolding sustainability crisis, the attack on the survive part of the survive and thrive equation, is actually already having historic consequences. Primary impacts we're already seeing in terms of ever-changing weather patterns and their effects on food, water, and community viability. And then, of course, secondary impacts are beginning more and more to manifest in geopolitical relationships. And then those geopolitical relationships are counter to the idea of developing all humanity as one tribe. So it is, we need to recognize the culmination of centuries under the influence of a very particular view of the relationship between human society and nature, which has been vested in the idea that nature is far stronger than anything humans can do. Our technological development over centuries, millennium, much of which in the past hundreds of years has originated in universities as well, and the world, the prosperity and the products of that view has been put into action. But it is, in fact, of course, the progress that has now led to this existential threat on life on Earth. And so our work is really this engagement on a fundamental issue of how we see our relationship with nature and the planet. So if you think about it in those terms, and I think the fact that you're all here is very evident that this is the gathering of the willing. No responsible person could just sit idly by and ignore it. And history and history have been defined in critical moments by the works of individuals and private and public organizations that have resisted the tide of their time and really helped society pivot. So the people who are committed to sustainability today are the links in that chain. And to some extent, our next big step is significantly increasing the number of people who see this as a transformative moment. So we do need to focus on the who will transform society. And historically, many transformations have been a small few then building up a large wave. And I think to extent in this case, it very much cannot be a few because so much of the changes have to be implemented locally around the globe. So it must be more of an en masse type of movement. We'll be hearing from others about crises and problems that are competing for attention. There are many challenges, of course, on the planet today, and every generation has dealt with large challenges. And seemingly the magnitude of the challenges gets larger with every generation. So unfortunately, at present, we need to grapple with the large challenges on multiple fronts. And knowing that our intentions will guide our attention, an attitude of engagement will be critical to move us forward. So thinking in that context, and then moving back to the university. Universities have this key responsibility to engage because human engagement is exactly what universities were created to do. And so I think done properly, that engagement will not only truly help us move forward, but at the same time redefine universities. And so that bi-directional redefinition is really what I'm thinking about talking about today. Changes that will cut deep into the structure and dynamic of university organization. And if we think about, if we're going to change university organizational structure and mindset, we need to recognize that today's contemporary university is really the product of the view of human society and nature's interaction. And the way humans and nature interact really drives the way knowledge is developed and then action is understood, and that defines the work of the university. So it takes us into sort of a deeper sense of what is a crisis and how do we react to crisis, and how does knowledge fit into the reaction to a crisis. This is probably not a very good textbook definition, but a crisis seems to occur when existing approaches to standard ways of doing things meet their limits and suddenly prove to be fundamentally inadequate. Sometimes that's the breakdown of safety nets. Other times that is progress has gone to an extreme such that the way society manages, mitigates is just fundamentally not functional. So that takes us to a point of having to then change our fundamentals, right? Our fundamental assumptions, our fundamental operating procedures. In short, I say we need to move from questioning the outcomes to questioning our assumptions. And as a change-resistant species, which I think humans truly are, active, transformative, or even disruptive change is difficult. And so, given the scale of the climate crisis, we have no options but to raise the issues of how we fundamentally operate and recalibrate our actions to navigate these difficulties. So with that backdrop, what are we aiming for? What do we mean if we talk about an age of sustainability? So to answer that future question, let's think about where we started. And so modern science and technology has really emerged with an intention of conquering or leveraging and using nature in the name of human welfare. So you could say, the goals have always been survive and thrive. There was a period of human evolution in terms of societal structures that led to agriculture, right? That led to really addressing the survive element by working together by developing societies. And then more recently, the science and technology movement has focused more and more on the thrive part. And in that idea of crises arising from things moving to a limit, right? I think that drive for thriving has now reached the point where our approaches put the survive back in risk. So it's a strange mix of both hubris and the lack thereof, because I think it's only recently that the idea that humans could actually do something that altered global weather patterns, that would transform the planet's climate, was to some extent a lack of hubris, right? A lack of understanding the scale of the impact that we can have. And so what we have discovered is that while the Earth's ecosystem is too complex for mastery, it was not unalterable. And so really, to me, the age of sustainability begins with pivoting to a more tacit recognition that we are part of the system and not really an audience, or that we don't just accept what the Earth's ecosystem brings us. So and with that, the benefits that we have gotten over this sort of millennium or more of scientific technology, health, longevity, the advancement of the highest level of human aspiration, make it clear that we have reached that limit. So, we have really had, I use water as an example because I think water is really a fundamental element of human life, but actually there's massive amounts of lessons learned in that context. So, we have had truly over the last millennia an amazing transformation in our understanding of water, particularly clean water and its role on human health and prosperity. We today take it for granted that we know clean water is important. It doesn't mean that we always deliver it across the globe. But really, the changes in our understanding of the role of water and clean water has had a profound effect on changes in human life expectancy. And ironically, this has in many ways led us to this new water crisis. So I don't think we're talking about an age of sustainability where we go back to an age where life expectancies were in the 40s. We're not calling for an intellectual retreat. And I think that's an important message that we infuse into the way we talk about our future. We're looking for that place between mastery and retreat, which is really integration and then moving knowledge forward. So integration of knowledge and society is really about adapting the relationship between nature and humanity, both of which we now understand to be powerful forces, to advance the concept of survive and thrive. And as simple as that sounds, it amounts to a fundamental redefinition of the goals of knowledge and action. So going forward, fundamental knowledge is ultimately defined in the context of understanding the planet as a system. We've always used the word ecosystem, but not clear we've always understood we're a part of it. And then, so the integrated and interdependent ecosystem of the Earth, including this now complicated human component, and understanding the way the knobs that humans control has real impact in ways that we can't always predict, is the core change, right? So it's not the interaction between humanity and nature, but really the role of humanity as part of nature. So then pivoting to this, back to this idea of like, what is knowledge? What's the history of knowledge? And maybe this is a science bias perspective, but in many ways, the idea of humanities rose after the idea of modern science, or maybe not modern science, but science, in the light of it. So there have been a few pivotal discoveries that have transformed humanity. Thinking the printing press and the ability to then share information in a large-scale way across more people, right? The information age and what we're doing right now, that I can communicate after a little bit of challenge with a room full of people across an ocean. So we think of science as being hard knowledge, and then the humanities that emerged were then more soft, more ephemeral, more uncertain. And much has changed since then, right? So science has then emerged to teach us much about human beings. So the birth and growth of social sciences or soft sciences that sit between these, what's now called hard sciences and humanities. But in reflection, the task of then integrating humanity and nature is really indicating that we need to ensure that our humanities are then informing our harder sciences. And so we don't necessarily know what the new relationship between the fields of hard science, softer science, humanities is going to be, but we know that it needs to be actively collaborative. And from that collaboration, really develop new ways of appreciating and engaging one another, which would be an enormous shift for universities. In particular, it's a topic that many universities in the U.S. are actually retreating from. And so we need to rethink the idea of what is a discipline of knowledge. The idea of discipline of knowledge is actually relatively new. These subjects have not always been structured in the way we structure them now. It's recent. It emerged, I think, as the distribution of knowledge became more and more normalized, right? Educating people became more and more commonplace over the last centuries. And frankly, because we are tribal and we then tend to, without intentionality, tend to silo ourselves. And so in many ways, it's proven useful, right? We can see many areas of progress that have emerged. But I think we've reached this moment, again, thinking about how do we need to transform universities, where an integrative approach to knowledge requires really the dissipation or melting of these boundaries between disciplines, at least the way we think of them now. So alternatively, we could reimagine a transition of a disciplinary structure that focuses more on outcomes rather than being based on the origin or lens of the knowledge itself. If you think about this in using terminology that's done in organizational structure, right? You imagine a matrix management approach, right? Where you've got columns that are disciplines and rows that are projects or topics. We need to start thinking about pivoting our driving forces and the way we organize and think about how we are as a collective to the problems that we solve, not the lens through which we're trained. And so in that context, this forum is very much an example of that type of approach, right? We are focused on building action, not focused outcome of truly transforming buildings is that more project-driven, outcome-driven approach that universities have not traditionally been built around. So how do we then shift and transform the way universities operate to have that more interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, or maybe even the absence of disciplinary structures to get away from silos, is really a critical need for universities to think through. And the irony, of course, in the US at least, students are at least a decade ahead of the university in thinking this way. So, anyone who's familiar with universities and what can also recognize, and then thinking about the scale of sustainability challenge, and even just the buildings challenge, no one university can do all of this work at a high level across such a complex field. So, one of our mantras here at Penn State is that we can do anything, but we cannot do everything. And so, if we then think about a system approach to solving problems, and knowing that no one organization can come close to doing everything, it then moves universities to think also about an expansion or a new mindset truly around collaboration, both within but also across universities. And that profound cultural change is a tall order. We have seen it in small pockets of certain technologies in the U.S. So a U.S. focus on improving microchip manufacturing thinks about building multi-university collaboration. And it is very much in that mindset of, how do we identify the problem and the goal as unifying piece rather than the discipline. But it's created collaboration, but at the same time, competition. And somehow in the space of sustainability, we need to find ways to move universities beyond even that competitive mindset and really recognize that this needs to be an all-in collaborative approach to address issues. Now, Penn State is what we call in the U.S. a land-grant institution, which means the fundamental origin of the university is dedicated to not just the creation of knowledge, but making knowledge actionable through dissemination. And so that really comes from a history of taking advancements in agriculture and getting them to farmers through community engagement, through having a presence in every community and engaging directly with the farming community. It's a great model for dissemination, across large communities. And then the question is, how do we take that mindset of not just knowledge creation, but actionable dissemination and implementation, right, into this space? So historically, that knowledge was applied, right, in the spirit of action from land grants, and it then led to true transformations in how we approach nature. So there are examples of where we can do this. So going forward, sustainability then needs to be that leading standard, that space in which we take this experience of dissemination and really scale it in a bigger collaborative way. Some may say that this type of approach will slow progress, but I think that the climate crisis has taught us that we need to rethink the definition of progress, and also recognize in a moment of realism that the shift will not go smoothly and linearly forward. There will be periods of progress and periods of regress, which we've seen already. And we have far too much to learn for this to be flawless. And in particular, we have far too much to learn about how to transform the social construct and the social mindset around the definition of who our tribe is. And again, the shift to industrialization went through this, the shift to the information age went through this. Any great practical or impractical learning experience in the history of humanity has been nonlinear and two steps forward and one back. Revolutions, whether we use the word literally or metaphorically, are always one. And easy has little place in human history. So that brings me back, I hope, 360 to the work that we're doing here. So first and foremost, like I said, the work that we're doing here is critical. Not only because buildings are such an essential element in human society, but because if we show we can do this differently in the space around buildings, then we show that we can do it anywhere. And we create a new paradigm for how we try to advance sustainability around the globe in different industries. We cannot repair our situation unless people such as yourselves figure out how to implement and deploy new ideas. In this case, the new ideas of buildings and energy into societies that are already struggling to meet day-to-day goals is the art that we are depending on. Universities need to commit in a new way and in a new depth to providing the knowledge that you and others around the world need, that is really integrative in the way I've been talking about, and not simply thinking of energy as only a technology, but energy as a humanist element is critical. It's true that much of what we need to know to address climate change is actually in some ways already known. But the way our approaches today remain expensive, dependent on economies that may or may not be situated to do the implementation that's needed. The idea of a circular economy as one example is a salute to the requirements of a holistic approach. The idea of natural capitalism, right, which has been around for 20 years, is another construct of how do we think about the integration of social science and sustainability as an implementation in a way that humans gravitate towards. So we really don't have, an idea of how far the right new knowledge can take us, how fast we can get to this age of sustainability, but we know how fast we need to get there. So with that, let me just end with this pledge to work with this community and others actively and aggressively to advance the idea of a new way of university thinking that addresses this need for knowledge to be not just created, but disseminated, implemented in these new ways, that brings together the vast disciplinary strength that large universities have to take input from around the globe, the North and the Global South, the East and the West, to understand what knowledge is needed and where dissemination is needed. It truly requires this engagement of practitioners in knowledge evolution and development, which we have always done, but now with a focus on sustainability that's a different scale and type of focus than I think done in the past. And as I said, it requires that we build this new culture of integration between holistic knowledge and the world of sustainable practice. We need to be fundamentally one community and one tribe. So thank you for your patience on the tech. Thank you for your attention. And most importantly, thank you for the work that you're all embarking on or continue to embark on as we move forward.
All right, thank you very much. Don't know if you're picking up on all the applause, but appreciate your remarks. You've got, I know you're under the gun to get to a next meeting. I had a real quick question for you. Do you find your peers in the universities likewise committed to rethinking universities for a sustainable age? Is that something that's a common vocabulary amongst your peer community?
There is certainly an interest in hearing about it. We've had an interesting exercise at Penn State just in the last, not even a year, looking at how do we, as a university of 24 locations along a large state, how do we build a degree program, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts, in sustainability that brings together, all of the disciplines that you could have a role in this, which is basically all disciplines. And for the most part, it's been actually an overwhelmingly positive response from the individual faculty across the institution. Some in the academic leadership spaces I wouldn't say struggle, but need to see how to do this in a way that allows them to function in sort of a more bureaucratic sense. But we had over 200 faculty show up over the Christmas, New Year holidays to just have large conversations about how this could emerge. And so it's actually being led by a faculty member from a leader from geology and one who's actually an expert in energy law, a law faculty. But pulling together engineering and earth sciences and communications and liberal arts in education, across the institution. So I'm seeing wonderful momentum here at Penn State, where sustainability has been a front and center topic for quite a while. And then when I talk about this with folks at other universities, I'm getting very positive responses, but I'm trying to not be too overexcited on that because, of course, I'm reaching out first to the universities who have been historically strong and committed to sustainability. So, I'm beginning the conversations with those who I think are most likely to be the willing, and then and who bring significant enterprise to the table. So in that sense, there is I think I'm probably far more optimistic about that approach than I was a year ago.
Great, thank you. Do you have time for another question, or have you got to run?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can take another question.
We've got the head of the youth movement here. He'd like to ask you a question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, quite well.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your remarks. I actually currently attend university in the United States, and you mentioned that there is a real challenge of building trust toward universities, and I fully agree with you on that point, though I imagine that we may be approaching it from a slightly different perspective. I'll give you an example briefly. This week, 4 students were actually expelled from Columbia University for attending a rally in which the violence in Gaza now was discussed. And in that particular example, there was not a hearing, and the students were unfortunately asked to vacate their housing and leave the school at very short notice. I'm sure that the policy at Penn State is different because all universities have their own character and their own culture, and I'm sure that Penn State is handling campus discourse in a different manner. But I think when we have these discussions about trust between universities and the broader social fabric, what seems to be at one of the facets that are at the heart of the matter is that the fundamental power dynamic between universities and students in the United States makes it difficult for us to see eye to eye and engage in a really equitable, healthy discourse. So I wonder, thinking about your experience at Penn State, what you see as a potential antidote to restoring that trust and bringing a culture of dialogue and discourse between students and teachers back.
So yeah, I appreciate that's a great question. And the Columbia situation, what I read about, and is unfortunate. I think another element to the Columbia piece as an example, right, or the hearings in DC a few months ago with Harvard and Penn and MIT, is the media focuses on those examples, like the Columbia example, as they should report it because it was an outlier. But it is very much an outlier in my experience in that, and this is a space where there is a fundamental difference, I think, often between public universities and private. Public universities have a different level of constitutional restriction as a public organization. So, at Penn State as an example, I think it's probably true of most public universities. We have a very strong commitment to the rights of free speech and free expression. And we have very clear policies and procedures when we think anyone in our community may have violated, processes. So, we, at Penn State, we're not seeing an overnight, expulsion, right? There might have been a suspension pending inquiry, in process, but there would not have been an overnight expulsion. But I think the other piece that's missed is, for every example of where attempts for free speech on controversial topics goes badly, there's probably 1,000 where it went fine. And so we have open forums and teach-ins and all sorts of free speech, free expression events at Penn State, whether it be on Ukraine, on Israel and Gaza, or energy, or any other topic. These things happen all the time, and usually without fanfare, because it's kind of boring news to say an event happened and people shared ideas. But that really is more the norm. So there's also the amplification of events because of social media and because the media has become more, in many cases, interested in what we call clickbait rather than information sharing. And I see it all the time. I mean, I'll see headlines that are sensational and read the article and really relate to the headline on any number of topics. So, I agree completely that Columbia's approach undermines what we need to do. And there was an article I read a few days ago on Michigan, which is a public university, chastising Michigan's new approach to suppressing what they describe as being Michigan's new approach to try to prevent protests, which if the article was an op-ed with one person's opinion, if that was accurate, would also be disconcerting. At Penn State, our mindset is always to be one, content neutral, and two, we recognize the potential for things to be more than just intellectual exchanges, but the risk of physical violence or counter protests that will drown out the speaker. We do everything we can to make it possible for events to go forward, no matter what the topic, whether we agree or disagree with the idea of the speaker. It's something most universities go to great lengths to try to see happen. But that just never gets, that's not news because it's what we do every day.
All right, well, thank you very much. Remarks have been appreciated. I don't see any other questions. I'd like to thank you, Justin, for taking the time to be with us, and wish you all the best in getting Penn State up on its feet as you've been working so hard for the last several years. So thank you very much and appreciate your time. Bye-bye. All right, cheers.
Oh, technology, whose side is that on that?
The technology now requires a coffee break, I think.
Yeah.
That's on your schedule.
Coffee.
So we'll take a half an hour break and then reconvene. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Stretch your legs, maybe. Find some rails, put the high river stay. Hope it doesn't close. Right cars are leaving here and it closes. Oh.
Ooh.
Watch what you say.
Scott, do you speak?
Scott?
All right, we could reconvene, please. everybody, please take your seats. We'd like to get started on this penultimate session. As you heard earlier today, we've got a memorandum of understanding with UNEP. We've been working with them for a number of years, and our main contact works in the city's division. He works for Gulnara Roll, who you heard from. And we had him on the phone the other day talking about the various challenges that they're trying to look to, and they'd like our assistance on. There's two of them. One of them is on the academic education side, and the Global ABC has its own academic network. But they're very focused on specific projects and grants. So they really appreciate what we're working to do, which is much more at the, if you will, strategic university level of curricula, connecting the dots within the organizations, training next generation architects and engineers. I've heard that language before. But the other thing is on finance. And the point was that all of this talk about sustainability, finance just isn't happening at the scale that's needed to deliver on high performance. In particular, Yves Laurent put a real finger on it. You might have millions of dollars being spent on, millions of euros being spent on high performance buildings, but there are trillions being spent on inappropriate technology, inappropriate structures. And the minute you build one, it's going to be there for 40 years. So you're actually investing in bad outcomes that are going to be around with us for quite a long time. So there are a series of questions that come to my mind when we talk about the issue of finance and we talk about high performance. There's the new build angle and there's the retrofit angle. And everybody's focuses on and realizes that it's the retrofit market that's the big, toughest nut to crack. How much money are we going to be spending on high performance? There's the issue of how you define high performance. Is it building by building or is it a community building? So that's the first issue. How much is it going to cost? Who are the actors? Who are the agents who are actually going to deliver on the change, on the change that needs to happen? Well, we talked about all of these different actors in different parts of the industry, but they need to be involved in the financing question as well, because they're the ones who are going to be doing the construction. Who's going to pay for it? Who are the beneficiaries? And if I look at a traditional spreadsheet, or I want to replace the windows in my house, so I'm going to look at how much it's going to cost me, who are the different contractors who I'm going to hire to do the work, how much is the total estimate, and what are my energy savings. And I do a cost analysis of how much does it cost me interest rate wise and how much am I going to save, and I get a number that says, "Ooh, that's too expensive, I'm not doing that." And I would argue that the traditional spreadsheet approach is flawed. You've got a lot of grants that are coming into place today with governments, and that's one way of reducing capital outlay. But that's just a small approach. You got the idea of subsidized loans. I can reduce my monthly payments, so the carrying costs aren't so high. That's also interesting, but it's pretty limited. The argument that I've made, that I've heard as well, I was at a conference in Cork about this, is if you look at the other outcomes, it's not just energy savings, it's not just kilowatt hours that you've avoided being consumed, it's also your carbon efficiency. So energy efficiency, carbon efficiency, health improvements. And those are absolutely very significant. If you get a high performing building, you're able to improve on the health benefits. You've got those benefits to accumulate somehow in your spreadsheet. There's security of supply, there's social justice, there's water quality, there's indoor air quality, there's the external air quality. Michael Bennett came to Geneva and he showed us some filters that we had. What's happening on the outside air pollution, what's happening on the inside, and you can see the impacts of having a properly functioning system on both the internal and the external air quality. Can we find a way to monetize those other benefits to be able to say, this investment makes sense. Then the final question I have is, are we actually targeting the right beneficiaries? Should it be only the owner of the property? Should it be only the occupants of that property who are actually on the mortgage? Because yes, they benefit from economic resilience because they don't have to pay so much, it's affordable and all of that. Yes, they benefit in other ways. But if you're talking about security of supply, if you're talking about the health system, if you're talking about social justice, there's a broad spectrum of social benefits that accrue from doing the built environment the right way. It's not obvious to me that it should all be on the homeowner, to all be on the renter, to go out and say, all right, here's how much money I've got in the bank, here's how much I make every month, and what do you think, banker? You're going to lend me some money. No. That's old thinking. That doesn't work that way. So we need to find other streams of revenue, and we have to have other participants, and we have to have other business models for doing the energy efficiency. Well, I just said the wrong thing. For doing the high performance equation, the way the sustainability requires. And I don't think we're there right now. So we've assembled a prestigious panel to help us with some of these questions. They don't have all the answers. Although I think they do, they don't think they do. So we'd like to engage not only in a few remarks that they'll make to begin with, but also to have some discussions with all of you about what your thinking might be. So we've got Louise O'Mahony, if I get that correct, who's joined us from the Banking Association. You can give me the full correct name of that. I've got Gillian Mahan, who's with the Climate Change Advisory Council, who missed out advisory in the program. And we've got Paddy Kelly with us from Collective. And he's been developing properties kind of around the world for a few years and has some perspectives on that. So I think you might all have some initial remarks, and then I'll have some questions for you. I don't know if you want to stay there, and if so, I'll give you my microphone, or if you want to come up here. Okay, good. Well, then I'll bring it over to you and sit down next to you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Louise O'Mahony, and I'm from the Banking Federation of Ireland. We're a trade association for the banking and payments community, obviously. So thank you very much to Scott and Marianne for the invitation to be here today. It's been really, really interesting to listen to different perspectives. And just very quickly, as I said, we're a trade association, so we are lobbyists on behalf of the banking community. Probably give you some tips on the way others you know what to do to talk with students. And so I've been working in the area of STEM finance for since 2017 actually, and in discussing with Scott previously about what we discussed today, you know, saying how far it has come. So 2017 we set up the STEM Finance Forum for members, and literally anybody who expressed interest in being part of this on the committee. But now it's really dynamic. It's really busy agenda for us. It's a priority agenda, and we are driven by it's the right thing to do. And there's a lot of people within the banking community now who are really, really interested, almost evangelical about the climate agenda. However, banks move a lot by regulation, and there's a huge amount of legislation and regulation in this area now. So without boring you all to the afternoon, just very quickly talk about the STEM finance framework in the EU. So people probably heard of the EU taxonomy and what the Sustainability Reporting Directive. So they are huge prompters of change within the lenders in Ireland, or in Europe, I should say. And what they require is that banks must, we call it greening, I've heard of it as a language and go now, but greening the lending. So they are required to make their financing activities green. So banks have therefore set net zero transition plans you hear about. They set their targets like 70% of their lending will be green by 2030. You hear that all the time, but what it actually means is behind the scene, and the big driver is actually private risk regulation as well. They must identify where the climate risk is in their books, in their lending books, in investment books. They must manage that risk, and they must report on this. So this very much shines with the European Commission ambition that it will no longer be sustainable finance, just be finance. We're not there yet, but there's a huge amount of activity going on within finance to make sure that they can identify the risk and understand the risk of management. When it comes to the built environment in Ireland is I think 10 or 11% of emissions. It obviously isn't low. It seems low because of other emitting sectors. I think Europe is 38% and Europe is more than 40% globally. So the built environment is really significant for the domestic lenders because about 50% of all the lending is mortgages. So for us, where the legislation and regulation is driving is that it makes much more sense for a bank to talk about to lend to the customer who is borrowing for purposes of an A-rated house, a B-rated house, or to renovate to bring the house up to high performing. And it's interesting that I'm high performing. This slide is good to talk because I keep up with energy efficiency, but now we need to move to keep it out to high performing. So I love the people speak because it's kind of program.
And good afternoon, my name is Gillian Mahan, and thank you for including me in this discussion. I suppose just for context, as Scott already introduced me, I'm a member of the Climate Change Advisory Council since 2021, and also sit on the Adaptation Committee, and also part of the Carbon Budgets Working Group. My background really is banking. I was Treasurer in the up to 2012. And then I joined the National Treasury and was the vice set up of the SBCI, the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, which gave me a different perspective, obviously coming from a capital markets background to working then with the SME community wider and the implications of market failure in terms of providing finance to that sector. I suppose having left the NTA, I ended up with the consultancy and then became part of the sustainability consultancy group, and I suppose hence I found myself appointed to the Climate Change Advisory Council. The Climate Change Advisory Council, just to give some sense of what it does, was set up under legislation in 2015. 2016 was the first appointment, and Mr. Roach 2021. That initial piece was quite academic, I would say, in terms of its profile. In new legislation in 2021, there was a recognition that they needed to extend the role of the Climate Council to set carbon budgets, and also to bring in more practitioners to recognise the implementation issues, not just the policy pieces that need to be defined. So hence I was in that selection process in terms of appointment, wearing a finance hat. So the council, our role, I suppose, in its title, advisory, but we basically challenge the government in terms of the climate action plan. We review it by sector every year. We engage with them on their achievement or delivery on the carbon budgets, and ultimately we are, I suppose, going to be careful with wording, but maybe a bit of a watchdog in terms of determining how much policy is actually being driven. The council position is there's great ambition, there's a lot being done, the implementation gap is huge, and that is the real limit. And key, I suppose, deliverable challenges there would be, this won't be surprise to anyone, the planning process and the financing process. Particularly when it comes to the environment sector. So I suppose, from my perspective this day, I suppose that I'm coming with Climate Council's view on where we're at on that piece, on grant financing, but also by my own experience in terms of the whole part of the private and public financing model, and my understanding of what I see in terms of engagement. So,
no, I think I only see one developer here in mind, but I spent my life involved in development, 10 years. I wasn't a constructor myself, and it was a bit lazy for it. But I worked with a lot of contractors, a lot of architects, and in different places. So I would always try and start with the vision being mastered.
what are you really trying to achieve? What I noticed down the years is a lack of capital, no shortage of bank money essentially. So why is there shortage of capital? Because every development starts with risk. Somebody has to finance the risky part. And there's no incentive to do it, that I'm aware. Now back here in the Tiger area, the incentives as in section 23, and that tended to get overdone. There was a very positive aspect. I got involved in a lot of hotels, it's involved in design, and of course when you're running a hotel or owning a hotel, you're very aware of all the costs. So that would take you into the area of sustainability. And Ireland in fact ended up with perhaps the best stock of Europe in Europe over a period of 10 years. So I would emphasize long-term planning, cycles take people, lots of people out of the game here in the corner of the game. So if we go back to 2000 to 2005, 2006, 7, and remember at a political level, the mindset was go on, prepare your harness it, anyone that puts a negative in the market was deemed to be, not with it. So we all ended up in 2008 as developers in Ireland now. Essentially, we were in the playing game, didn't mistake the banks and then finding the banks are not developers quite as much. We were all responsible, but it was never seen like that. So we had built in Ireland, not very sustainable, but we had built the houses, an average of about 65,000 a year. When you think in the downturn, we dropped as low as 4,500 houses in one year, maybe on both sides of that, maybe 5,000, 6,000. So in a decade, it was 100,000 houses. So today, then, we come up to date. The quality is terrific. And there's few sources of capital, not very many. And the hedge fund industry who came over from America and seen as enemies. And so Ireland has this capital on deposit, but we're afraid to use it. So I would love to see an incentive where people would be encouraged to provide capital. But if they lost it, they could have maybe upset some tax. But just reward incentives, I'm sure some of, not all of the part of Charlie Munger of Warren Buffett, and he'd say, show me the incentive, and I'll show you the result. So I would put a lot of emphasis on long-term capital. To build your capital takes a lot of patience, and the taxation system here does not encourage. So you're encouraged to borrow money and keep on borrowing. But if I was saying to my own grandchildren and own family who are around the business, if you have the patience to build a capital base and make sure you don't borrow more than perhaps 30%, but we were all borrowing 70% when the market has taken trouble. So I hope that's helpful. This story of people, we were all young once. I think it's important to know who's influencing it, who's following it. And I think we've been a bit short of that in Ireland, but we now have all an opportunity to look beyond Ireland and find our heroes elsewhere, including Ireland. But Ireland is in the process of learning. It's a great country. Thank you.
All right, that already has provoked a lot of questions. I'm going to ask the first round and then I'll come back to you all. We need to get that microphone out to these folks here. I guess the first question I would like to ask is how big of an impact, you say that folks are trying to green their portfolios. Are they actually changing their behaviors, or are they only responding to regulatory push? Is it a regulatory push? What kind of impact is that having on their returns? Can you say that out public?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know the returns, to be honest with the question. And yes, it makes sense for lenders to finance green activities that they can see as sustainable, because this is about financial stability. I don't think this group needs to be convinced of the fact that due to an acute climate crisis like river flooding, which is happening in front of us, and like a river flooding or a climate event that happened with Stronger Event last year, or with just ongoing climate events, you know, this has real implications for businesses and households. So a customer that is acting to retrofit their property, be their house, their factory, whatever, to make their building more comfortable, better to live in, is actually a customer. Central Bank did a really good paper last year on climate and energy efficiency. They actually found that I think like 30% of all new builds in 2022 could be deemed green. That is like what do it's what B2 to use our power ratios. It's just about the energy rating of the property, what the use of the energy, that's what we're required to use. So banks want to, they're part of our regulation, but it's also about financial stability. You know, in an ideal world, they would only support customers who are demonstrating their sustainable activities, but that can't happen. You think about it, I think it's only 14% of houses in Ireland have a power rating of B2 or more. So most people who probably live in C or lower down in my case. So, you know, we can't, like, if that transition finance element, so EU taxonomy, for example, talks about sustainable economic activity. So banks have to report on where they are in that, how much of their lending portfolio is aligned with taxonomy. But the fact is that banks only really want to transition. This is where government talks about just transition, and that's really, really important. So you have to bring people, you know, almost regardless of the views, you know, or what they think. It almost doesn't matter what they think. It's sort of saying, okay, you want capital, you want to go, you know, we're going to, here you go, here's the rate. Actually, if you come back in some years' time, it shows that you reduced your heating, solar panels, whatever, you know, we can give you a reduced rate. The banks have the time for their really economic effect, where they might be the only person who's talking to somebody who is interested in that. Someone's coming in looking to do something with their business, and they might be the only ones who actually say to them, you know, we can get cheaper out if you can demonstrate that you can have the perform. So that's not easy to do because it's all about you have to demonstrate that, you know, that right with this metrics. So a lot of the focus at the moment is on reporting, and really interesting conversation with somebody that's quite far saying, geez, we're so focused on reporting, you know, and showing what we're doing, and focusing on like training and upskilling. There's a lot of that going on as well within staff. So you can talk to people, they're talking to the client, you're talking about earlier on, but people feel pressurized to do things, and they feel like this is my problem. But you sort of bring them into having a better business or a better working house, it's better for everyone. So I don't know if I asked the question actually.
It was slightly different, but your answer was better than my question was, so that's fine. I would like to ask Gillian, you made a couple of remarks that I found greatly interesting about the Climate Change Advisory Council. How would you describe the priority that buildings and the built environment get in the work that's done in the council? And secondly, when I look at how Irish government is set up with housing and environment and higher and further education and foreign affairs, they all work in their own little space, but they don't actually talk to each other very much. Does that influence your thinking much?
Being recorded, am I? Okay, big question in a sense. Just to the built environment, please. We look at every sector, and we look, obviously, while we set the carbon budgets for the whole economy, the politics sets the divisional or sectoral ceilings. So, I suppose we would think that there may be undue influence in certain sectors to have a lesser climate target than others, which is probably politically driven, and then others take up the slack. And I think the built environment is one of those that takes a bit of the slack up. There's considerable ambition. I mean, we admire the ambition. The difficulty is in delivery, and even though there's been a lot of progress, and we are seeing a lot of retrofitting, etc., of houses, the reality of being able to deliver the ambition is very challenging. So there is a whole issue around, once we have a housing issue as well, the competition to use the same resources both financial and skills to deliver retrofitting of 500,000 houses and 400,000 heat pumps by 2030, and also build, if you go by the latest politician mandate, 250,000 houses by 2030. I'm not sure where the people are to do that. I'm also not sure where the capital is in terms of final priority. So, one second, my question was.
How do you be so structured?
Oh, yeah. Yes, with due respect to all goodwill, there's a silo mentality that happens. And I suppose from the council's perspective, we are trying to emphasise the need for cross-cutting lateral discussions, a holistic approach, recognising, to your point around housing impacts health, life, just transitions, etc. So it can't be dealt with in one or one lateral or one personal piece. We have to recognise the other issues like higher education, working skills, the issue of having an awful lot of due respect to my student colleagues here who are, but the amount of people who do actually, apprenticeships to deliver on the actual work is not sufficient. So we have those challenges, and in talking to each other, we try and influence it because we meet with each sector, and then we meet across it, so that they get the message more than once in terms of where we think this gaps.
All right, thank you very much. I know that the crowd wants to jump in with lots of questions, so I'm going to ask you also a double question. Patty, if I may. Sebastian, he's going out right now, but he gave a webinar a while back. He was really insistent on the fact that the building industries around Brussels, where he's from, very much resisted any kind of tight codes. And somehow he got lucky, and they set a very aggressive code from the get-go. And years later, the industry came back and said, wow, I'm so glad you did it like that, because this step-by-step tightening makes it very difficult. You have to retool, you have to rethink along the way. You're better off doing all of the pain all at once, get it behind you, and then move forward. How consistent would that be in long-term planning? And again, I'm going to refer to Richard now. We had a discussion last night. It's not about just building buildings, actually, it's about developing communities and neighborhoods. So if you're going to be going to a tight code and trying to do a neighborhood, you have to do everything like mobility and food and waste and the rest of it. Do you have any thoughts on that angle? That's my first question.
On the business of doing everything now, tackling the highest fence, I'm not certain it's happening. At the moment in Ireland, there's been a lot of de-zoning of land. And somebody is envisioning not getting the perfect future, but how do we get there? Not in the big long jump, but I would set the principles out there, let the vision be massive. But you have to work from where you are. It's almost like, say, initially it seems very slow, but as years go by, it compounds and finally has. So I intend to say, again, I repeat, that the vision be the massive. In Ireland, we've been particularly poor, and our best planning here was done by the British, and that's very in going back to nice squares or whatever, nice. Or was in Trinity College yesterday, did something so special, but it would be the top class architects. So it's only in the last, I'd say, 30, 40 years that Ireland has this quality of architecture, or potential, because we have the people qualified to do it now. So I would, what part of it am I not answering, perhaps the vision of it now?
No, you don't want to go to the full hog micro permit.
Yeah, because I just know it doesn't work. It works in theory, but how does it work in practice? Because you have to work from where you are. And it would mean almost setting down order. I mean, how has the car industry evolved? You see the BMW, you see the original ones, but there's a relationship the whole way through, but you're almost upgraded. So we know on the refurbishment, I'm sure Michael would know too, that the grants almost make it possible. But I think they're designed to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Maybe if I just.
Yeah, okay. Please do.
No, well, just on the ground thing, I mean, regardless of what market is, like where there's market failure, government steps in. So grants are there to do that. But to your point, they're not enough to entice behavior because most of the people who need to actually do this, like whatever, need to do bigger jobs. And that's where the lending, and you need to have this lending finance model where the loans need to align with the grant model, so that at least, yeah, so that at least there's access to finance, and I think that continues to be a problem. Sorry.
And I just want to clarify one thing for that. When you do this extension, chaplains up to do the work, mostly chaplains. And he's working terribly.
Sorry, they won't hear you on that. You need to put back.
Sorry. When somebody comes up to work on Friday, saying he's worked over, and on that day he works, he gets half what he makes. As in his taxation is 50%. It's very hard to persuade them to come in. So the taxation has to be aligned. Also, if you are paying 50% tax yourself, the fellow who you pay is paying 50%, there's very little value there. So that needs to be addressed. So then you get this massive inflation. And who can finance it in the end? So we all fall down. So long-term planning to me is central.
So I need to include the tax ministry in this list.
Why is it? I think the American
Yeah, but to be honest, even on the tax, on the tax piece, like there are initiatives in other countries that doesn't work here because our structure of our tax system doesn't work. Where retrofitting or upgrading your house goes on your tax bill or it goes on your energy bill, utility or anything that be part of your energy or your property tax bill. So that's an easier sell to people and we don't have that access. Most of Europe.
Sorry to hug you right now, yeah, there is a gap. We did a report last year on retrofitting, and I think it was the SEAI themselves said, it requires between 25,000 and 30,000, even with the grant, even with low finance loan, and the SBCI with the EIB, the European Investment Bank, have introduced, it's actually the first in Europe. It's a scheme to give lenders a guarantee, a loan loss guarantee, so it makes it much easier for them to borrow this money on the capital markets, and that would be launched. It's going to be positive, actually. It will launch soon, I think. That's a really, really positive thing. We did a survey last year on consumers, and of those who were interested in renovating their home and maybe retrofitting, only a quarter of them were going to borrow for it. And it points to the fact that there are a lot of people in Ireland who have a lot of savings, actually, but they're not. They don't necessarily need to borrow for it. I'm not saying that's the huge road to do. It's really, really important that we do this and do it at scale. But having said that, it's more about the conversation we were having earlier with Jim Gannon as well about sort of culture and communications and tipping points, where it gets to the point where people, almost even if they're older, that they see the benefits of retrofitting their home. For in terms of this, I know I would say this Scott Atkins, you've mentioned this before, about older people and their homes. When you get older, is when you should have a comfortable, safe home that's not drafty and not smoky and all those things. But there isn't that kind of maybe conversation going on in Ireland so much, or maybe I'm just unaware of that conversation.
To that point, older people can't borrow.
Yeah.
So that model doesn't work, and where you have a population where a house is not, where we have profile of the houses that are not in mortgage are owned by older people who would like to upgrade their houses, and they can't because they can't. That bit between grant and the actual. No, I'm saying they have savings, but no.
I can keep going, but I know that there are questions in the audience. I will now.
So I have a feeling you and I can talk for hours. I really like some of your comments. You talked about incentives, and really we have bad incentives in the system right now, is my opinion. We do a kind of a push-pull system where we do push green financing and stuff like that, where we actually built a pull system where incentives were to build high performance buildings through payments. For instance, in my opinion, is buildings can provide a lot of services for the grid. And if the savings of the grid could be then transferred to building owners, that gives the banking industry the cash flows for debt service. I just love the three of you to talk about that. It's where we really should try to, it's like carbon taxing. If we did carbon taxes, much like Europe does with gas taxes, you end up with a more efficient transportation system because people don't want to buy a private car. They will do commute. While in America, we have very low gas taxes. And what does that? We have three cars.
Well, I think that when you look at in the full picture, you know, where you live, your public transport. I spent part of last week in Madrid. I was amazed at the efficiency of the road system. I don't think I saw one traffic jam. We seem to be able to float in, float out, but this is a major road, I think it's 61. But run the whole way in beside it, a little bit away, was a train station. So every village, you have the option. And my son John and right there, they have bought a house there. They argue that the cost of living there is about half. But buying a house of 3,000 square feet for 880,000. And all that you're speaking of seems to be half. The villages seem to be complete. I was fascinated. So you had a village, and it had a lovely culture. That was nice shops. If you wanted a bigger shop, you drove a little. But in the village, you could live very comfortably, and you know your neighbours. And I was very impressed, I have to say. So I'm going to do some research on it. And it was not moving too far away. Ireland was good. We brought in the Americans with technology. But they were invited in here and they made them money. They took it all away. But they get the local jobs. And finally, it has got up now to 15%. So that's the source of our capital in Ireland. I suppose I'd like to see that being utilised to create long-term planning here. And that we could say, 30 years from now, we'll have implemented some plans we have today on a long, sustainable basis. And no quick, we're not going to get there in sudden jerks. You have to have a long plan, and you have to have a lot of discipline, and then you finally get there.
Well, I just come in on that question. I suppose this is the joined up thinking piece that we don't often see in the planning process. And I don't mean planning, I mean planning as a long-term vision for what a country or a community can look like. A lot of countries do it better than we do. But there are finance models that exist in some of those countries that look to particular needs. And I would talk to like investment platforms that brings in public and private money with the deliverer of the service to create a wider view and delivery. So it doesn't happen everywhere, and it does have to be done very well with the part of it. But there's a lot of European money that can go that way, and I think it happens, definitely happens staying over so there is that piece that we need more generally to think impact, and to my earlier point about thinking nationally as opposed to vertically in terms of solutions.
Thanks. I think Mike, you had a question. Yes. John, does it address it?
All three.
All three.
I mean, we're talking about financing and building transformation. We're seeing electrification of both buildings and transportation. And we're going to see the electric usage go through the roof. Frankly, it's going to go up. So the question is, follow the money. Who's got the money? And I mean, I'm not as young as I used to be either. And you've got a lot of older people that you know, how long are they gonna live in the house? Do they really want to make a major change and spread it out over the remaining 5 or 10 years? They don't. Who's got the money and who will benefit the most? It's sort of a shared benefit from making buildings more efficient and proper. And the share is the people who live there, their electric bills will go down. But also when you talk about tomorrow's grid and making electricity, utilities are going to spend lots and lots and lots of money to the extent that the building sector reduces the demand. They save a lot. And let me tell you, this is a zero-sum game because utilities don't pay for anything. Customers pay for everything. When you talk about tax credits, who are the taxpayers that are picking up that bill? Or is the government just printing more cash like we do in the United States and inflation goes up? So if you've got utilities that have a relationship with every customer, and utilities have, I mean, the cost of capital to a residential customer who's not wealthy enough to afford this is probably 20 or 25% on their visa bill, and they don't want to add any more. But utility, at least in the United States, overall cost of capital is about 10%. They have access to the credit markets and they can get as much money as they want. I believe that you should take all of these improvements, home ownership, efficiency, appliances, and allow that to basically become a lien on the property. So that if you've got an elder person like myself, they finance it and it goes for 20 years. And when I sell my house or my kids sell my house, it goes with that payment. Utilities understand the problems with customers who don't pay their electric bills. They might not pay their business, but the regulators can make them whole. So there's a system there for guaranteeing them. But these are the people that understand what kind of improvements will really affect their power bill, what works, what doesn't work, what makes that investment optimize the building investment and the electric grid so they work together. It's not just building and making things, transforming them so that the customer can have a lower electric bill. Tomorrow's buildings are critical parts of the grid because 70% of the electricity goes to the building sector. And you can get building people to understand that they will be supplied, solar or battery, they will be storage, either thermal energy, heat the house at the middle of the night or cool it, and it runs in your water heater, and they need to be properly compensated. They are flexible load. So those are things, but so my concept is to really have the utilities involved in financing some of these major investments.
That was a comment, not a question. Is there a question in there? Don't you agree?
I think I don't know if there's a question, but I suppose these are arguments we would have had, and I would have worked on looking at the profile of ownership and how you incentivize that, how you make it easier, how you will transfer the debt with the property as opposed to with the person. It all depends on your banking model or your financing model in the country. It doesn't really exist here, but it does across a number of states in Europe where they do let the debt pass with so that the utilities are involved in some cases. And it's just, I suppose, that from a European perspective, because the market I know best, there's a lack of consistency, despite having general similar regulation, there's a lack of consistency of approach. So every jurisdiction tends to be slightly different in terms of the solution building. And when I looked at it in a project to try and transfer some of the better working models into an Irish context, and you wouldn't start from here would be the answer, because it would just be, legislative mind, and then you'd be 20 years from now, and I'd be dead, and solutions still wouldn't be good. But in principle, totally agree.
What I'm hearing is that what you're speaking, in a sense, it's urbanism, where the road the services in the house have essentially all gone. And so when you build a house, well, who finances it? Certainly the security, a provider of services who might be able to get paid easy. Turning off electricity used to be a big issue in Ireland 40 years ago. And so the more integration you get, but don't forget we were essentially a rural people. And if you went back, say, 60 years ago in Ireland, the solution to every problem was to export to people. And that's our background. So to move from that to a fully integrated urban environment, it's quite a, but we're getting there maybe. We were involved in some, in Smithfield, and we did 1 million square feet, and there was a lot of your thinking there. Of course, we built it in about 3 years, but then there was a collapse in the economy. And so when you think of long-term planning, it's very, very difficult. That's this.
Everybody is saturated.
I don't know if we're getting any questions from the
No.
ether.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I'd like to turn the floor to Richard, but before I do that, I want to ask him to include a comment along the following lines. We had an interesting chat last night, and you talked about shifting the perspective from what was delivering X number of units, because that's what was required, to much more of a community concept. And I want to bring it from a finance angle. If you want to be developing a neighborhood that delivers on mobility and neighbors talking to each other and people feeling empowered because they've got a job and they've got training, it's a shift in fundamental culture of a neighborhood and how the building industry functions. And that can't happen without some kind of financial underpinning. It's the long-term planning with mobilization of finance. You seem to be doing that at Riverside. I don't know if I've said it too strongly.
Switch it on.
Push the little,
Try again. And yeah, I mean, so slightly different from what I've been talking. Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is effectively in a different policy landscape. We are, not just because of the Danish version of the book, but we are partnered with the Danes up in area called Albertslund, and that's about designing key networks and understanding the opportunity to deliver community-based, not-for-profit, affordable warmth, affordable comfort into the homes and recognising that the income stream built against alongside social rent. I think the opportunity, though, regardless of what the circumstance, comes back to that question. One of the biggest challenges I think that I see in different countries is, go back, bridging into the question I'm going to ask, is, when you talk about things like green mortgages, those are for the people that are educated enough, wealthy enough to go and get those to make the financial investments. Those are probably the people that need the least. And actually, the communities that need to be assisted first has to come from that general plan basis to say, how do we take communities that require investment, require them to build, produce, help, increase, and all those other things. How do we find a finance model? So I've touched on place-based finance models. People have even mortgages 25 years, probably the loan up rates touched on, people value the debt rate, property long term, probably intergenerational, actually, the level of the length of debt is required. So the question in there is there an evolution we can see in the Irish market that allows that to happen? And could you use social housing to be the good trying to do it as a catalyst for that?
I don't know that I see the evolution. I think the challenge is, and I think it's really interesting to comment earlier about the generation roles. I think there's such a nervousness around that within the banking community because of the pushbacks to the crisis. I was actually, for other reasons, on the Safeguarding Ireland board about issues of customers who are vulnerable, and the sort of pushback around the table from older people's representatives about, oh, you can't, that's not fair on older people, so there's maybe need for more mature dialogue around that and more ambition indeed in the lending sector want. And I think the challenge, I don't understand like an excuse, but and it's been a comment from USI earlier as well about the challenge of the housing crisis. It's just stopping so much, so the idea of prioritising energy efficiency, it's easy when it's a new build, for law, it's energy efficient. But the challenge of the housing crisis is sort of making it very, very difficult to be ambitious. I don't know if that's an excuse, that's just my observation of where we're at.
Just on the social housing piece, and I suppose the council's perspective is that we would say there the house that needs to be done first. That regardless of the housing model we have, but you can do them in collectives rather than one off. So it's more efficient in terms of the resourcing, both from finance and from the skill set. So there is a considerable amount of that being done. Commercial reality comes into a number of people doing these jobs want to get paid, they want to get paid at market rate, or market rate, so that you do find, I suppose, because we're competing for the same resources, both finance and skill sets in terms of delivery, that the commercial market is probably winning out. But I mean, we would recommend every year that that's where the legislature should be going, not as you know, more educated, as you said, those who already know the green mortgages, already know all the ins and outs of the deep retrofit or whatever it is. And so there's a whole contrast, and I suppose we would see that it's part of the just transition. That we have to bring everybody with us in terms of making sure that they can live a healthy life in their home by choice, not waiting to be asked to do.
Listen, the retrofit is a great idea, an essential idea, but it hasn't been thought through. Just drive through any town in Ireland, and above the first floor level, it's it. And we've got the ring roads, which is helping, but the big trucks go through, so they're not places to live. You'd have to pedestrianize if you want to make these places worthy. Does that help in any way?
Probably that piece of dereliction as well, the breakdown of communities because we don't have people in small towns. In this country, we tend to be all over balance and everybody lives here, so we have a lot of empty towns in most of the country. And it is about that social dynamic. We're going to do this in the broader sense of moving communities and giving them nice places where they can don't have to be
That's an interesting comment, because in France, they're clearly pursuing a policy of densifying urban areas. So getting people out of the smaller communities and putting them into urban environments that are high performing, dense, and it helps with mobility and the rest of it. Real quick question. This relates to the mechanisms for learning, because you've described Barcelona, you've described other places where it seems to work better, and everybody's always looking over the fence saying, oh, that's pretty interesting what they're doing. But that seems rather ad hoc. Are you satisfied with the machinery that's in place to share lessons about what's being done well somewhere else and what could be applicable here? And to give you a quantitative number, Sebastian, again, in that same webinar, and I recommend it to everybody, he said that a city like Paris, a city like Brussels, a city like New York needs to be retrofitting 15,000 units an hour between now and 2030 if we're going to make it to our destination. That's a very big number. So how do we do it?
I'm not going to answer the question, just remembering that the climate action plan says that retrofit to reach the ambition that Gillian outlined for 2030 requires 20 billion. So that's just for like 11% of our emissions. So it's huge. That's what we need to bring in the private capital. I don't know. I just think there's so many silos. It's so, I don't know that we're having the right conversations in Ireland to be as ambitious as Madrid and our agreement. Paddy, need to live there. I was there recently. You could eat your dinner off the metro. I didn't. It was so clean. It was so busy from way out. Like, it's amazing. And I I didn't up on that, it's just tragic. Sorry, go, I got to pass on.
Any further comments? And I will call it.
If it makes sense, we've just refitted the document backdrop. But most of the data there, first of all, it happened under European legislation. If you apply for anything in Ireland, you'll be held up for at least maybe 2, 3, many cases, in our cases, 7 years. So everybody talks, but not that many do. So in the case of that, the people were from overseas. We're doing a similar one in Canada. Everyone is from overseas. And there's no Irish involved, because we couldn't get it done. And so, does that sound stark? But it's the truth.
On the point of learning from other jurisdictions, I suppose when I moved into the National Treasury, I ended up on 3 representative groups for national promotional institutions, which are basically those who take up the slack in other countries in terms of the market doesn't deliver to the public good. It's an arm of public finance, but usually based on loans and usually based on guarantee structures for local needs. So what we did with the SBCI was basically doing that here, the first kind of risk sharing structures. But key, I thought, in the whole process was the value of those relationships across different places in Europe to keep us from going down the cul-de-sacs. And I think that's key, and I'm not sure it happens in every division or in every sector, but there's huge value in talking to people who are doing the same as you're doing in a different jurisdiction and testing whether that will work here or not. You know, depending on the jurisdiction, but I think there's huge value in it. Does it transfer all the way into government departments? Some places.
All right, Michael, I see you've got the microphone. That looks like a question wanting to happen.
Just, you know, there's so many points of view there. Speak away here for.
Put it on.
Sorry.
Great help.
I said there's so many points that are coming up here with the speak away here for the top read about it in different areas. But I just want to hit on 2. One is I built passive housing and happy homes since 2007. I read out an email I got last Friday morning from a couple of family last year. They're living in a house that a lot of me last year, about 2,100 square feet. 40 electric, everything, heating, cooking, lights, television, it's all electric, no oil burner, no gas, no heat pumps, no fire, no coal, no torch, no sticks. And just this lady, I met her Friday afternoon, she said, did you read my email I sent you this morning? I said, no, I don't read emails during the day, but I just read it out. Morning, Michael, hope you're well. Regarding the auction brochure for houses number 7 and 8 Grange Lock, you may wish to mention that our electric bill for 1 year was €850 for suppliers of electric Ireland. That's Patrick and Lorraine. That's the total cost of their house per year. And now, I'm probably directing this is something I've had with banks for a number of years. If people are saying, there's people spending 2, 3, 4, 5,000 a year, maybe more, on heating, electric, and running their houses. We've also built social passive housing. And it's exactly the same type of house. Everything is the same. The running costs are longer a year. You know, that gives those people more disposable income. It gives them more money to do pay back. It's like a legal mortgage. You know, I can also say that it's costing no more to build this type of house than it is the traditional block type with fireplaces and oil and all that. So, you know, I think it's a no-brainer for banks. I think banks and, you know, banks should encourage, you know, these are an A1 rate house. You know, so just that's just a point. The second thing is retrofitting. The retrofitting market is absolutely huge. The built environment that we have all over the world, not just this country, to start retrofitting and de-retrofitting to bring it to an AM1. It's phenomenal. We're hearing figures thrown out, basically, I'm showing figures of that, what it's costing the service. I do retrofit, the de-retrofit, do some home. When you go into a building that's, 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe 100 years old, and you start to try and retrofit, I don't care what surveyor you do, but initially every day you go in and move one bit forward, you find something new, it costs. And costs. There was a program on television last night about a house in this town, and one guy, and he's done a lot of work on himself, he's a lot more still. But, it's deep retrofitting, and as I looked at it, I said, I saw so many problems, dry rot, line mold, all these things for this cost. But the deep retrofitting market it's an uncharted waters in some ways. But, and there's no two buildings exactly the same. So that's just a second one. Mike touched on the grid there. The grid in Ireland is also treated. And I just need to flip back across there for a minute. We speak about the grid. That house has 16 panels on the roof. And we have a 10 kilowatt battery storage. Last year we had problems with exporting surplus generated electricity. It wasn't on a single house. So, we speak about the grid. Grid in Ireland is pretty. No one is speaking. The ministers, the government are not interested. Thank you.
Ireland is not alone on creaky grids, trust me on that one. I'm afraid we're going to have to come to a close on this session. I would like to note that we've covered a number of different topics in the course of an hour. I'd like to thank you all for the richness of your comments. To me, that opens up a number of areas for further dialogue going forward, whether it's on tax policy or multi-generational loans or the relationship between refurbishment and social objectives. There's a wide range. I won't go through all of them. But it is only the beginning of a discussion. So the whole finance question and how do we mobilize, as Yves Sepulveda said today, the trillions that are needed to get this done right. This conversation needs to be had. It needs to be had in a way that's very effective to deliver some serious results. So please join me in thanking our panelists. I think we can be released, and I'll introduce our next speakers. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
All right, we've got a final presentation today. The gentleman who's joined us from Germany, Andreas Brauer. He is the chair of the Utilities Technology Council, and he's also a member of the Strategic Advisory Board of Enniscorthy Forum. And he'll be speaking to us about some of the examples he's got from the European scene. So, Andreas, you want to speak from there, or would you like to come up here? As you wish.
Whatever you like.
Whatever you're comfortable with. I can be here.
Let's go to by the way, I was told that you were some questions.
Ah, okay. So let's have a seat and choose a question.
Yeah, Mike, I guess there's no more profit. Apologies. So, maybe before I start with the comments on what you can see in the agenda, give you a short, I want to give you a short introduction on my person. Andreas Brauer, I'm working in the utilities sphere since 2003. And one of the biggest utilities in Europe, formerly it was RWE, and then especially the grid part was taken over by E.ON. And there I'm responsible for the innovation for different infrastructures, so electricity, gas, water, heat, and communications infrastructure. And since mid of 21, June 21, my focus is now on hydrogen. So how to build up a hydrogen ecosystem. That's it. So maybe that's as a short introduction, and I'm familiar with huge projects with different partners, also funded by national governments and also European. Maybe that's I think important to know for so I have two topics to touch on. One is policy and what's happening in the environment of policy and target setting, especially on climate goals. And the second one is what would we as a utility do and what new technologies are we going to introduce and see on, especially on the horizon. So let me start with the discussion on the policy and the framework. Because Mike, you touched that point, why not have a holistic view on the billing integration, what's also the favor for the grid, or how can we combine all the different infrastructures and also the markets. So what especially the German government did is to set these, let me call it's climate goals. Climate goals, but also translated them into goals for building up of renewables, especially wind and photovoltaics. Of course, since years we have these goals, but in 22, the government decided to increase these goals, so make it faster, so to say. So we want to reach these goals faster than all the years discussed before. And especially for the grid, this means, and it's called the Easter package because it was published in 2022 at Easter. This means that we are increasing our budget for the grid extension on a number of three. So it's a huge paradigm shift for all the involved utilities. This in the past years also we've been incentivized to be more efficient, to decrease our people in the company, to be efficient also in spending the money. And now it's paradigm shift for all the utilities, which means that now we have a lack of resources. So we are forced to build up our grid faster than it was decided before this Easter package. We have 3 times the budget for the upcoming years, and we have actually, to be open, no clue where the resources will come. Because we need people with experience to build up the grid. And if we combine that with the building topic, then from a perspective of the utility, where we then have to focus to integrate wind on offshore, onshore, and where we have to integrate also the PV. For us, it's good to have high efficient buildings because this minimizes also to that extent the grid extension towards these buildings. And we can focus on the integration of the renewables. Regarding the private sector, our government also decided to more involve the municipalities and communities. So they have a role now in the future. They are forced to build up a roadmap for the heat sector. So every single community has to build up a roadmap or a strategy for heating in the private sector within the next years. I guess it should be finished in 28. This puts a high pressure on municipalities because they have no clue how to do that. Gives us possibilities also as a utility and also consultants to jump in and support. But I think the essential point there is that the municipalities are really forced to do roadmap for their own municipality, how to deal with the heating sector. Behind that are the targets for heating. Targets means that 30% in 2030 of the heating sector should be renewable based. Then in 2035, it will be 40%, and in 2045, it will be 8% of the entire heating sector will be then based on renewables. This puts a huge pressure on the municipalities. This is dealing with new buildings, but also with retrofitting buildings. So there's no distinction between the different building types, so to say.
Go ahead. I have a question for you. You were asking.
Okay. Okay. So this is the Easter package, and then we have the product. And third one is the generation business. You know that we switched off all the nuclear power plants, especially in Germany, and there was a very interesting decision made by the government a couple of weeks ago regarding the generation plants. We've been a little bit surprised as the utility, but the decision was made that we will build up also new gas-fired power stations. Gas-fired, but initially they will be fired with natural gas, but they are combined with the target that in 35 up to 40, 2035 to 2040, they all have to switch to hydrogen, to green hydrogen. So any new gas-fired station has to be hydrogen ready. That decision was made. This is law now by the government, and in order to reach this goal, also the TSOs from the natural gas business decided to build up a hydrogen backbone system. And we have a good situation because we have lots of infrastructure in place. And time being, we have two different gas qualities. High caloric gas and low caloric gas. And in the future, we will only have one quality, which gives us possibilities to identify parts of our gas infrastructure which we can take out of service, because we only need one quality and not two qualities in the grid. And we can then change from natural gas to hydrogen. And this is exactly done by the plan for this hydrogen backbone system, that they define 9,000 kilometers of infrastructure, which then will be switched from natural gas into hydrogen. And the plan for this hydrogen backbone system is to connect all the different, what we call it, hotspots or clusters, where we today see the need for hydrogen. So we will have connection, which gives us then also the possibility for import. We're in discussion with, for example, Australia, Canada, Scotland, also with Spain and Portugal, to get ammonia to the big harbors like Wilhelmshaven, Rotterdam, for example. And the plan there is to build up crackers and then feed in green hydrogen into the backbone system. We deliver it directly, priority one to industry, which is using burner technology and need high temperatures. Second to mobility, and then third to the heat market. But we believe that, especially in private heat market, we will not see as much hydrogen as for example. It's more a trend to use heat pumps and to get rid of natural gas in general. So that's currently the discussions we have on political level. especially in Germany, but also in Europe. And well, I talked about the ESA package and the challenge the utility has. So we have to think about technology. I mentioned, of course, green hydrogen. Utilities are willing to invest into generation of green hydrogen, but I'm thinking about the price for electrolyzers on a regional basis. The price for electrolyzers and green hydrogen is by far too high. So we're in need of very intense discussions with manufacturers to give them an incentive on the market and provide some data what we expect to have in place over the next upcoming decade on electrolyzer capacity in order to give them the opportunity to build up their production and also with the hope to decrease then the prices for electrolyzers. So green hydrogen is a very important topic for the utilities, especially these ones who have natural gas infrastructure. And second, digitalization. If you think about this budget of 3 times that we had over the last years, we are really forced to digital, to bring more digital technologies into our grid. In general, you could say that the transmission grid is fully digitalized. We have a huge amount of data which we need for control and safety and also security issues. But if you go down to the lower voltage levels, medium voltage and low voltage levels, you could say that we are totally plugged. So now it's a kind of a panic I can feel in our own environment, utility environment. We're very fast in bringing fiber optics in ground, having mobile solutions in place, also connecting smart solutions, smart substations, or bringing digital sensors in order to get in the first step information, and then secondly use this information to be on the path to a full autonomic low voltage to medium voltage. That's the vision we have as a utility, because we think if we have to connect these various amounts of different renewable technologies, we do not have the people to serve our grid in future. So we need to digitize, and also we need to be more autonomous. So there also comes artificial intelligence in place, to have algorithms in place which can make decisions on a regional and local basis, where in the first step, of course, human being has to interfere. The decisions like circuit breaker open, close, whatever has to be done, can be done fully automated. So we're building up the plans right now. So as I mentioned, with the panic that we are really forced to act. We are building up strong relationships to service providers, because every utility has to look for service providers, and you all know if you're looking for service providers as a whole industry, you do not find these amount of service providers you need in the future. So that's exactly the point, and the reason why we are stepping into corporations right now, in order to save these resources for us to develop. Maybe that's in a nutshell.
I ended up with questions pretty quickly, but I will say that the political environment in which you operate is extraordinarily challenging, because some of the decisions that are taken, we'll just say they're eye openers, and it goes all the way back to the coal thing that lasted for a very long time. we heard earlier that passive house can reduce energy demand by a factor of 4 or 5. It's an enormous change. It would seem that you could actually achieve a lot of your objectives on energy supply by managing the housing demand, which is within region and possibly cheaper. Is that something that you as a utility, I'm not worried about the government, but as a utility, is that something that you'd be interested in achieving?
Well, absolutely. I have a project where exactly this is the focus. So to combine buildings with the grid and look for flexibility, because if we think about flexibility as a utility, you have always to compare the conventional grid extension with the degree on flexibility or the money you're spending in flexibility in the environment of buildings. So what has to be done is, and this is my personal opinion, is we do not have a real flexibility market. That's exactly what I'm looking for. If I, as a utility, decide to use flexibility, there's nobody to offer me flexibility in the environment of private households or buildings. Of course, in the industry environment, that's day-to-day business, there's decades, but especially in municipalities, small communities, we're really looking for having this flexibility market in place because we fully believe that we can use flexibility instead of grid extension. Because again, the Easter package, we have to spend our money to integrate the renewables. So if we can save money for the grid extension regarding the communities, we can spend the money in integration of renewables. But there are some things to remember if we talk about flexibility. The utility needs a certain quantity of flexibility. Of course, we need a certain price for flexibilities because we always compare with transformers and prices for cables and so on. And we need time. So if you, for example, provide me flexibility for 1 week, I cannot work with this flexibility. Because if I need flexibility regarding my trade, it's more than a week we're speaking about. We're speaking about weeks. So the question we have towards our customers providing us flexibility is how long can you provide us, for sure, provide us with the flexibility we need. Because elsewhere we have to build up cables and transformers. So that's very essential if we talk about the flexibility market, that we have a guarantee or security or safety of supply regarding the flexibility. And there comes a new market for in place, the so-called aggregators. Because if we have communities, we have different buildings. And then we can think about having different suppliers of flexibility. And then as a utility, I'm not dependent on only one building. So I will be dependent on the aggregator, and the aggregator is solving the problem and providing me the flexibility. And where it comes from doesn't matter. It needs to be in this certain region, because there I have the problem with my grid. But from which building, I don't mind. It's the role of the aggregator.
I've got a second question on your digitalization comment. You talked about digitalization of the grid, but if we think about digitalization of everything, first of all, but secondly, specifically in the building sector, you've got systems going into your buildings that are going to be smart consumption, smart use, appliances, and that's that interactivity. So there's a price responsive demand. You've got systems going in to monitor and track indoor air quality and temperature. That's the Nest type of technology. You've got systems going in to track critical raw materials that have gone into the building so that you can recover those materials afterwards. You've also got systems that are going in to manage the maintenance and operations of your systems. The amount of data that we're talking about is just extraordinary, which means that the number of data centers that you have to build, and we're going to be talking about this in the coming days, is going to be exploding is a bad word, but anyway, there's going to be a lot of them. If you did the data angle right, this is Richard's favorite point, you'd be able to use the waste heat from the data centers for district heating systems. And I would think that that would again be something that you would find interesting as a utility.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think sometimes Germans are a little bit overdoing this. If we think about it, of course they do. I started years ago in this first discussion around the smart metering system. And the basic idea of German government was to have a smart meter, which then is connected to a so-called gateway. And Scotty mentioned this entry point to the building and also data from outside. And the ambition was to have a gateway in place, which is the single point of contact for a building. And we over-designed it. It was and is too expensive. We are still currently rolling out our smart metering system. And I think it's 10 years ago when we started the discussion around smart meters. So what happened in between is that Nest and other providers did their offerings to the building, and the people don't care about any gateway and smart meter. They are buying Nest, they are buying Google, Amazon, whomever, and they have now a bypass to the smart metering and gateway system. So this gives us a very hard time to collect or to come to this data, because what we have to do is we need to address every single household. Do you have Nest? Do you have Google? Do you have whatever the can provide us with data? And then we need to have a contract with the single customer. And the ambition initially was to have one huge contract coming from the government, and you can address this gateway, you can get the data you need from the gateway. What happened right now is chaos. So coming back to the point, one thing is having data, second thing is have the right information. So what we follow is to have a more decentralized approach, to have so-called grid edge functionality, which translates data into the information we need on a central basis. So to have more the data poverty approach, that we are not forced to transmit every single data set, but we are transmitting the information. And we are collecting the data on grid edge, so to say. But we have lots of different data centers coming up in our regions, which have to be connected to the grid, with a focus on energy efficiency, for example. Not the classical data centers, but also data centers which are like Microsoft published to build up a huge data center in our environment. They want to connect, and they will also offer energy solutions. They want to offer AI algorithms for energy efficiency and so on. So there will come up some data centers in the future where we are in discussion with, but we strongly believe that if we can manage to translate data in information at the extent of the grid, then we are not forced to transmit any single data set. Because we do not have the communication infrastructure in place. And we do not have a connection with fiber optics that every single house. We do not have it, we will not have it.
My wife, by the way, refuses to have Linky set up at our house because she considers it and abuse of privacy. So there are lots of attitudes about smart meters. I'm gonna ask one more question. I'm gonna keep my eyes peeled if you've got any questions. Richard, fire away. Actually, while this is coming over, I'll ask my question. Why on earth people think it's smart to take a ton of steel that's pushed by petroleum products, or a ton of steel that's pushed by electricity that also has lots of critical raw materials in batteries? Why is that logic considered sustainable?
Maybe I'm the wrong person to answer that question. I'm totally with you. That's exactly the same when we talk about mobility. Currently, and I mentioned hydrogen, currently we're in a huge wave of electrifying mobility.
Right.
Everything has to be electric. But if you talk about the heavy trucks business, logistics companies, they tell me I'm stupid. I never ever would buy an electric heavy duty truck because I'm not able to drive tons of battery during over the streets where I'm reducing my load, and the load is the money I get from my customer. So I fully believe that we will have different solutions in place, and thinking about hydrogen for the heavy truck business, that could be a good solution. Indeed, we have some good testing for trucks, and we are building up also fuel stations for it. I think we need to find solutions where they make sense from also from the business view, also from our climate goals view, not only to jump on any technology which pops up and you see it and yeah, that's the real thing. Yeah.
Richard.
Thank you. I'm not going to talk about data centers as you do, because otherwise I'll run out of things to talk about. I'm not sure which names. One of the things. My question is more around, I suppose, the finance model, following on from the finance discussion. In the UK, and I'm presuming it's similar across Europe, one of the biggest challenges in the space is switching consumers just constantly changing supply. And Scott's already touched on the benefits being utility or reducing the costs. And alongside that, that's not it's not an obvious correlation about changing the relationship with the customer and utilities, which all utilities make billions of pounds of profits, being the provider of the finance to expand on that retrofit and reap the benefits itself. Pay back multi-generational food meter, provide comfort as a service, provide minimum standards, all of those things. Is that something that's being discussed in Germany as an option?
Well, that indeed, great comment. Thank you so much. Indeed, we're behind the curtain discussing the sense of unbundling. The situation is that we have different market rules like retail, we have a metering market rule, and we have the grid distribution and transmission market rule, and we have the storage market rule. Totally independent. All market rules are independent. And when we started with this discussion around smart meters, obviously the benefits can be seen. The grid has benefits, the retail business has benefits, the metering business has benefits, but only all together. And then we jumped into the discussion who's going to pay for it. If we're going to roll out expensive smart metering system, the retail business told me, I'm making 30 euros a year per customer. I cannot afford to pay an expensive smart metering system. The grid business told it's 70%. I said, why should I? And the metering business said, oh, I have only my small metering fees, I cannot afford to pay for a smart meter rollout. So then finally the government had to jump in, said we have to do it as a metering company. But after a long discussion, and I think what's hindering us is that we as, for example, a grid provider or grid infrastructure provider, we cannot use all the data which will be provided by a smart meter due to unbundling. And the retailer also cannot use grid data due to unbundling. And if we can find a solution for that, I think, then we can achieve what we all want. Because we have then the full transparency with what are the not perspectives, but what are the delivering aspects for single customers over the next upcoming days, weeks, from the retail department, and vice versa. We have the information from print, where print comes into a critical condition, for example, due to forecasts on PV, on wind, and then both can talk to each other, which is really difficult right now. So there's not a big efficiency in the entire energy system due to the market forces.
All right, I think we need to draw to a close, if I'm correct. Is that, yes, I'm getting a positive sign. So I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this evening. We're going to get you twice more during the next coming days, so you're not done yet. But I'd like to give you a round of applause. I would like to make a couple of remarks just to wrap us up. We've had a number of presentations during the course of today that really highlight the challenging seas into which we're sailing. We heard from David Chikvaitsa about global geopolitics. We've heard about all of these different stresses and strains that are emerging. We heard from Justin about the educational system, how there's a need for a new way of thinking. Every single one of these topics deserves attention, and we need to grapple with them. I said it earlier around lunchtime. I think that the buildings and the built environment have an extraordinary opportunity to make a contribution across all of these areas, but we have to get on with it. So we have to be very focused on these are the challenges we're facing. We have to have open discussions about what they need and modify our behaviors as a consequence. This is day one. I think I'll turn it over to Barbara Ann to say this is the close. We're going to go to the dogs next. But I found today pretty interesting despite the technology challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Scott, because despite the technology challenges, you can cool and we got here at this part. So this is not quite the end of day one. Dinner is in the Alamo at 6:30 p.m. So that's through the bar and into the Alamo, and we will all be together in there. So we'll be sitting together. And we're going to the dogs. Anyone who wants to come, you're very welcome. It's the Greyhound track in Enniscorthy. It's one of the things they do on Monday night in Enniscorthy. There is a bar, so if you're not interested in being out and looking at what's going on, you're welcome to come and sit in the bar and enjoy a bit of social life up there. But it's in a country town like Enniscorthy, there's not many things on an April evening on Monday. It's one of the things that happens, rain, hail or shine, on Monday and Thursday, so they would like to have us there. So dinner at 6:30, we'll be bringing people up by car, so if you want to come, be in to the dogs, be in the foyer by 7:30, and we'll start ferrying people up and down. And then we're going to be back here for 9 in the morning, and pray the Lord that we're not going to have any more tech difficulties, because I think we've had enough today. So thank you all very much for your patience today, and we'll talk to you very much soon.